September 24, 2003. Reality is elsewhere. The periphery is where the future reveals itself. J.G. Ballard. I also think Wire and the Banshees count as London, since Watford and Bromley are in London's orbit. Part of embracing the future is always rejecting the past. In fact, this applies to people who move from the provinces to the centre as well. I was a bit surprised to see Luca argue that people from the provinces always want to defend the provinces. Surely it can work the other way around as well. You can be overeager to shake the small town dust off your feet. Ballard is one of the few poets of the suburbs. The more typical stance is to dismiss them as non-zones, resting places, the phrase dormitory town capturing this perfectly, whose airy, mediocre pleasantness equates with an incurable existential dullness, a fundamental inauthenticity. That, in fact, would have very much captured my own discomfort about suburbia when I was growing up in it. It never felt real. To us dreaming suburbanites, the only real place in the country, paradoxically because of its hypermediatisation, was London, this giving a slightly different spin on Luca's claim that London is the only real city in England. And America is even more real. We who lived in the suburbs of towns that were themselves anonymous and mediocre were exiles from the city's real, insubstantial wraiths resigned to our status as non-beings. The city is not the only real. The rural, with its mighty, deep past indifference to the ephemeral, its enduring time in which things go on the same though generations pass, hardy, has its own claim to fundamental reality, as if the city is the rural's aestheticization, its capacity for translation into art, that gives the countryside its impression of the real. The suburb is neither nor, the buffer zones between these two reals. When 2 years ago, in flight from London logjam in photosynthetic hunger for greenery and a curve back towards my childhood, I moved to Bromley, I was self-consciously fleeing the real, yet upon my sort-of return, the suburban struck me as less unreal than, as Ballard has tirelessly insisted, surreal. Streets that seemed like collages brought to life, full of strange incongruities that could only seem natural in the sedentary stillness of the suburb. Apartment complexes that resemble seaside villas, looking out on a busy thoroughfare rather than the ocean, as if they've been dumped there by one of those cosmic collectors from Doctor Who that could wrench lifeforms out of context and reassemble them as carnival exhibits. Lawns so precisely manicured that Lewis Carroll's Queen of Hearts could play croquet upon them. It's all so eccentric. Tempting to lapse into a Lynchian-depth psychoanalysis here, a weakness to which Ballard himself is often prone, to shift from the ironic soft-focus idyll of the long shot into the unforgiving grisly detail of the close-up, to look for the id beneath the suburban superego, more interesting to recognise that the surface is already psychotic, that nothing lies beneath. For Ballard, our assumption that cities are the future is an overhang from 19th century modernism, a notion as quaintly, endearingly outmoded as the prophecies of Jules Verne. With its concentrational density, its cramped streets, its unplanned sprawl, London is a horse-drawn Victorian relic. To Ballard's delight, and to Ian Sinclair's horror, the future is not the city, but the suburb. Unlike the old population centres, whether the ancient Roman shells or the relatively recent residual slag heaps of industrialism, the suburbs have been built with the car in mind. They thus give rise to the developments which Sinclair abhors but cannot help be fascinated by. Ghostless out-of-town retail parks and shopping complexes, non-places accessible only by car, zones whose calculated, franchised anti-locality makes them resemble nothing so much as airports. Cities recede like 19C smog in the strip-light-lit, purpose-built hygiene of Bluewater, Kent. Comments. Fee good design and thoughts, but my scrolling finger. Ouch. That was from Sean. September 24, 2003. A new career in a new town. Well, here it is, K-Punk's new home. Massive thanks to Abe, not only for his generosity in giving K-Punk space on his side, but also for enduring my many incompetent technical requests about movable type with apparently endless patience. Comments. Looking pretty good, kind of industrial, bleak design. Is there less text width? Your pic top left reminds me of Tetsuo Body Hammer, so is your blogspot area dead and gone? B. Val. I thought that too, the Tetsuo Body Hammer thing. I gonna attempt to harness the RSS feed on Synod Static. Hey, there should at least be a link to the Blogspot site. Call it an archive. Posted by Mike. Looking good. Matt Ingram. Lovely, Mark. Other music bloggers, please take note. I see you've kept your beloved Courier font. Angus. Yeah, still a bit of tweaking required, but it's getting there. Mike, you're right. It's absurd not to have a link to the old site. I'll sort that when I get home. Courier, can't live without it. Tetsuo, nah, it's years before. John Fox graphics for I Want to Be a Machine, 1977. From Mark. My god, even the music bloggers are migrating to MT now. I'm running out of excuses. Nice new look, well done. Mike. With a side as good looking as yours, who needs MT? Most of the credit for the new look is down to the man A, Benny Who. From Mark. September 25th, 2003. A kind of Alaska. I think of snow, not only because of Atuishi Fukui's delightful cover painting. It took barely 2 listens, less maybe. The old flame, changed, though not beyond all recognition, had me again. I'm burning. Now I've lost count of how many times I've succumbed, even though it can't be many. I know that, as yet, it can't be more than 4, but I'm already in that aeonic time you fall into when you encounter something loved. Life is now inconceivable without it, so I imagine that it has always been there. You keep putting it on, you lose yourself easily, lose track of which track you are listening to. No beat to mark out time, no verses, no choruses, only insistently hesitant vocal refrains, unhurried by rock's adrenal urgencies, only words that are dream disconnected, dream cryptic, dream vivid. In the ice desert, the slightest perturbation produces massive affect. Recall the trembling stillness that opens Talk, Spirit of Eden, the feedback shimmer of How Soon Is Now. Imagine them denuded of even the attenuated R&R release that they are allowed there. Imagine their seemingly infinite protraction. Sylvian's blemish, astonishingly, really is every bit as entrancing as Marcello and the still absent penmen say it is. Astonishing, not because I distrust their judgment, very much to the contrary, but because I feared their word sorcery had conjured a phantom/fantasy that no record could live up to. Burning. There's nothing quite like blemish, nothing in Sylvian's back catalogue, nothing elsewhere. It's been described as vocal ambient, an accurate enough description technically, but a little too anemic. Not quite seductive enough. The same writer called it formless, which is terribly misleading, far from being chaotically unfocused. Blemish has a glacial poise, a near absolute tension, and is nearly all guitar. Imagine that. Derek Bailey scrabbles, Christian Fenez's glitchscapes, and mostly the troubled waters, the uneasy flat line of Sylvian's playing. Undercurrents, the good sun before Sylvian sings, Bailey scratching away like a deranged music box, hints of Kubrickian, Ligeti/Penderecki, atonal dread, and then the voice. Don't try to make sense of it. It falls on me, on my face, and my pulse is so slow now, I'm slowly delirious, barely distinguishable from the landscape, and that's what I love. Out here in the white cold, the flames are so bright, and it falls until there's not much of me left. It falls on me and I'm falling into sleep, or deeper. Comments. Can't wait to hear it. It sounds sublime. Earthly bound question. Is it well recorded? David. I would say so, but not in that tasteful way that for me has made all of his previous solo efforts well nigh unlistenable. From Mark. September 27th, 2003. Regeneration time again. Pleased to see that both CNWB and Troubled Diva are celebrating the just announced return of Doctor Who, and I know that Angus will be cheering too. Can it be done successfully? The signs are not encouraging. As everyone knows, the series was in decline long before the plug was pulled. It couldn't survive the unforgiving light of the 80s, and sloped off to die in embarrassed solitude. Tempting but misleading to date the effective end as Baker's departure. Baker's last season, culminating in the peerless Legopolis, There Will Be No Future, was full of presentiments of doom, deep melancholy, and Jerry Cornelius-style riffs on entropy. If you watch the stories from the Davidson era now, though, and they are currently being rerun on UK Gold, you'll see that they were shadowed by a similarly bleak mood. There was still enough imagination at work to generate stories that were off-kilter, quirky, and fascinatingly paradoxical. Davidson's first story, Castrovalva, was named after an Escher painting, and was in 1982 BBC's attempt to generate a world collapsing in on itself in Escher-esque recursion. Perhaps recursion and entropy are where all mythos ends up, eventually. The Davidson period was the last time when the series could fematize rather than fall victim to these self-referential vortices. By the time of the arrival of Colin Baker, Doctor Who was nothing but a palimpsest of empty signifiers circling around its own entrails with diminishing returns. Take the clothes. The brilliance of Hartnell, Troughton, Pertwee, and Baker's wardrobes is that, in their different versions of a strange Edwardiana, out of place in any place, out of time in any time, their eccentricity was plausible. The thing is, you could imagine someone looking like that. In that respect, the rot had already set in with Davidson, whose cricketer's whites too obviously looked like a uniform that only someone dressed by the BBC's wardrobe department would wear. Colin Baker's question mark lapels and two-coloured coat, well, kinda to say nothing. There was also a problem with looks. The first 4 Doctors had a naturally alien quality. Davidson's problem was his winning, fresh-faced toothsomeness, something intelligently offset by his reading of the character as beset by an ancient melancholia. Colin Baker, on the other hand, looked like a smug office manager in pantomime costume. He had a solid, doughy ordinariness, more deadly to Doctor Who than any Cyberman or Dalek.
The point is, Doctor Who was, at its best, uncanny in both Todorov's and Freud's terms. Todorov's typology of the fantastic famously distinguishes between the marvelous, the full-on supernatural, and the uncanny, in which the apparently supernatural is explained away in terms of the laws of reason. The fantastic proper has no positive presence, and is defined as the hesitation between these two other modes. The Pertwee period is particularly given to discoursing on the supreme value of scientific inquiry, witness for Doctor's attempts to tutor Joe Grant, Nigel Neal's Quatermass and the Pit, which attempted to wholesale swallow horror into SF by tracing a whole slew of ostensibly supernatural phenomena back to scientifically plausible phenomena, provided the template. The signature Pertwee serial, The Daemons, a more or less straightforward rewrite of Neal's story, was only the most blatant Quatermass remix of the Pertwee era. The absorption of horror tropes into SF naturally had an effect on Doctor Who's science fiction, most notably in the period when Philip Hinchcliffe was producer, when Doctor Who went through a foggy, gorily gothic phase, in which Victorian horror was Birkenhair grave-robbed and reanimated. The series is also uncanny in Freud's sense, the uncanny, that species of dread evoked by the strangely familiar, what is here but which should not be. Pertwee's famous insistence that a yeti on a toilet seat and tooting back was more terrifying than an alien on the planet Zarg was born out by the fear caused by the episodes featuring the Autons. The Autons, very craftwork, possessed showroom dummies and plastic chairs. Children were mortified when these everyday objects which anyway evoked a frisson of uneasiness, came to life. But more even than any of the monsters, it was the Doctor himself, the familiar stranger, who was uncanny. The 96 revamp of Paul McGann and Oodles of Dollars failed because it couldn't muster his sense of the uncanny, nor more damagingly did it appear to realise that this was what the series' strength was. The whole enterprise couldn't escape what it was, an American TV-funded attempt to graft some of the signatures elements of the original series onto the standard format of an MOR American serial. McGann's manic enthusiasm seemed formulaic rather than charismatically alien. The chase scenes and the love interest were perfunctory and unnecessary, but worst of all, really, were the sets. Money badly spent. The TARDIS had become anonymously vast, all smoke, sulphur, and moody lighting, a blandly portentous sanctum-come spaceship, straight out of the mediocre dreams of Dungeons & Dragons fantasy and mainstream SF. Russell T Davies is to produce for New 1A. Well, last year's The Second Coming was rather brilliant. In addition to the audacity of its assisted suicide of God denouement, it was genuinely, shiveringly disturbing in parts. But what gives me most hope is that The Second Coming rendered a sense of the otherworldly numinous in the context of the dry, ably contemporary. The uncanny, exactly. Christopher Eccleston as a Mancunian Christ was, all at once, intense, self-deprecating, charismatic, and weird. What priced Eccleston for the role of the Doctor? In the comments. Like, I'm really surprised to hear you uttering kind words in the direction of The Second Coming. I found its theology to be cheap and sensationalist, and the drama by and large to be obvious. Eccleston's Christ was a tedious fuckwit, pontificating about a revelation that neither he nor the writer really understood. I have no idea what possessed Davis T.He to write it, but clearly the spirit was malign, says Philip. Mark, you have an unclosed italics tag again. Just off to know in, and I know that Angus will be cheering too. I am cheering, of course, says Angus. Could the next Doctor be a woman? Paul McGann would like to think so, says CNWB. Phil, the Second Coming was far, far better than I expected. Maybe my expectations are too low. Angus, unclosed italic tag now closed. I wish these glitches would show up on my machine/browser. Chris, for God's sake, let's hope no one with McGann's ideas is allowed anywhere near the series. He sounds like a cross between a coked-up American TV executive and a crazed politically correctionist. Sexed it up. And how is one to read this last line from the Telegraph piece? There are currently no women on the shortlist, although Sir Michael Caine has an outside chance at 66-1. Is there something about Sir Michael we should know about, or is it a reference to Dress to Kill? Says Mark. Bloody brilliant piece on Doctor Who. I was never that entranced by it, but was scared witless by the episode where the Master made people into little dolls. Eccleston lost my vote for his appearance in Gone in 60 Seconds, and he's crap in 28 Days Later, says Bal. Davies had in fact quite an established telefantasy pedigree before The Second Coming, Dark Season 1991, Century Falls 1993, and Spring Hill 1996. He also wrote the late-night vicarage soap Revelations, so bad even ITV wouldn't network it, which in a bid to look like a feature film was converted to chroma-heavy, field-suppressed video. Imagine CBN's Barbara Wintergreen at an elocution, and you're halfway there, says Michael. There's a Davies SF fan site here, http:// www.centuryfalls.co.uk/. He wrote Revelations? That settles it. I used to love that show. It was completely addictive schlock. Hey Michael, have you seen any of his other SF stuff? Is it any good? Says Mark. Interestingly, Australia's version of the BBC, the ABC, has just started rescreening all the Doctor Who episodes from the very first one, I think. Have watched it a few times and have had a little laugh, but everything about it is so cheap and stuck in time that it feels like a museum piece and nothing else. But then I never did like it that much. Says Phil T. Fucking tasty, accurate, truthful, Nick. Nick, thanks for the comment and for kind words on Gutter Breaks. Felt there had to be a Gutter Breaks K-punk convergence at some time. Our aesthetics are so similar. Feel the early 60s episodes are very difficult to watch. It's antique TV, painfully ponderous, but the late 60s, 70s, and early 80s was a glorious period. Yeah, the effects remain reasonably poor, but only people without imagination make that complaint. FX destroyed SF. Discuss. Mark. Spring Hill was a C4 tea-time supernatural drama set in Liverpool about a young boy haunted by the death of his grandfather, psychologically adept with a correspondingly disturbing use of atmosphere. Dark Season, from what I recall, was good. Original BBC children's telefantasy from back in the day when viewers could have reliably expected it. Jacqueline Pearce and Kate Winslet were in it. Also included a character called Mr. Eldritch. Oh yes. From the late 80s to the early 90s, Davies wrote the scripts and apparently also the recipes for Why Don't You, and is thus responsible for that bloody freak Ben. As to how he sees the Doctor, his Whovian novel looks to be straightforward urban gothic, says Michael. Sounds like he's got a serious pedigree there. It's good that he has a background in children's TV. It should never be forgotten that Doctor Who is a children's show, says Mark. It should never be forgotten that Doctor Who is a children's show. The stated target audience was of a 7 to 15 years age range, thus dovetailing impeccably into the anti-Oedipus's key demographic. Davies, unlike a lot of that generation of telefantasy writers who'd otherwise have been writing for Who, Gaiman, Horowitz, hasn't a hope in hell of his pre-career work getting a TV repeat. It might therefore be an idea to agitate for a DVD release via the Mausoleum Club forum, which is a link of sorts between the cognoscenti and companies catering to a specialist market, hosted by Michael. Might have some hope with the Doctor Who connection, don't you think? Says Mark. Might have some hope with the Doctor Who connection, don't you think? We're all, of course, assuming that revival goes all the way from pre-development press release stage to FX-laden multi-million-pound realization, and that Mal Young won't make it reasonable by casting his mistress, who otherwise specializes in surly medical receptionists. So you link there. http://us.imdb.com/name/nm05431443/ as the assistant. BBC4 are having a ballad night of sorts on Monday. 11 o'clock profile, J.G. Ballard talks to critic Tom Sutcliffe about his life and works. 11:40, towards Crash, films from the BBC archive anticipating the world of J.G. Ballard's novel Crash. The Wacky Races, Maureen from Driving School. 12:10, 13 to Centaurus, Ballard's interstellar sci-fi story, first broadcast in 1965, Donald Houston stars. The Out of the Unknown episode briefly mentioned here. http://www.625.org.uk/ootu/ootu.htm. Full listings for next Monday. 22 o'clock home. Anthony Sher stars in this new psychological drama based on J.G. Ballard's story, The Enormous Space, and shown as part of BBC4's J.G. Ballard season. Gerald Ballantyne is about to return to work after a period of convalescence following a car crash. During this time, he has reflected on the collapse of his marriage and his dissatisfaction with his job as a senior scientist for a food company. He suddenly has a flash of inspiration that he feels will end his troubles. He will become a suburban hermit. Ballantyne withdraws into his home and severs all contact with the outside world, sending into semi-starvation and resorting to increasingly desperate measures to drive away visitors. As time passes, he becomes aware of a mystery about the house itself, a secret which slowly possesses him and drives his project to a startling conclusion. Also featuring Keith Allen, Deborah Finlay, Matilda Ziegler, and Guy Henry. Written and directed by Richard Kirsten Smith. 23 o'clock, Ballard, J.G. Ballard profile. BBC4's short season dedicated to the work of J.G. Ballard continues with an interview of the man himself, overlooking a Ballardian landscape of a giant reservoir under a sky of aircraft on their final approach flight paths. Writer J.G. Ballard talks to critic Tom Sutcliffe about his life and work. 23:40, towards Crash. Two films from the BBC's archive anticipating the world of J.G. Ballard's 1973 novel Crash, which has shocked, disgusted, or delighted readers for 30 years. Ballard's 1970 film on the automobile features Gabrielle Drake and crash test footage galore, while Christopher Petit's 1990 film anticipates David Cronenberg's film released 6 years later. I think the key image of the 20th century is the man in the motorcar. It sums up everything. 0010, Out of the Unknown, 13 to Centaurus. J.G. Ballard's disturbing story of psychology, social conditioning, and hubris was dramatised by Stanley Miller and was first broadcast as part of the BBC's Out of the Unknown science fiction series in 1965. 12 people live in the only place they know that exists, known as the Station, a multi-generational spaceship. They are subject to mental conditioning administered by the 13th crew member, Dr. Francis Donald Houston. Abel Granger, James Hunter, one of the younger of the 12, develops an unconscious vision of the sun that he could never have seen. He even begins to work out the physics of the station and that it appears to be a spaceship. Then he deduces that the gravitational forces it is subject to could only exist if it was attached to an object as large as a planet, roughly the size of Earth. Out of the Unknown is one of the most cherished anthology series in television history. 4 series were produced between 1965 and 1971, which veered from sophisticated science fiction, including dramatizations of authors such as Isaac Asimov, to disturbing psychological horror and supernatural stories. Although many episodes have sadly been destroyed, this treasure has survived, and tonight is its first airing in nearly 40 years. In fact, it's actually more of a Ballard week. On Tuesday, there's Solveig Nordland's 2002 film of low-flying aircraft, and on Wednesday, the bookmark tie-in to The Kindness of Women, Shanghai Jim, followed by Spielberg's rarely seen production of Empire of the Sun. Wow, thanks, says this is from Michael. Wow, thanks, Michael, says Mark. Great piece, Mark. Spot on about Davison. I think he works best when Bidney's writing and the centuries-old being peeks out from the youthful veneer more often, but I would say the accentuation of human qualities in his portrayal brought out a level of emotional engagement in me I've never experienced before or since of Doctor Who. In stories like Castrovalva, Kinder, Earthshock, Frontios, and Caves of Ventusani, you really feel for his predicament in a way I don't think you do or can with his predecessors or successors. A big shout here for Spring Hill, low-budget invention at its best. Some good actors. The show was a springboard for Christine Tremarco, and it worked brilliantly watched in close succession. See 4-screen consecutive early morning repeats a few Christmas ago, and it completely dominates my viewing memories of the period, says Nathan. Just gets better. BBC 4, Wednesday, October 15th, 9:30, The Neil Tapes, 10:10, The Stone Tape, posted by Michael. I'm wondering if this Neil Tapes isn't the interview of Kim Newman filmed by the BFI, but instead another one, part of which is included in the Time Shift program about the year of the Sex Olympics, says Michael. Thanks, Nathan. Yes, Baker's appeal was his cosmic detachment, Davidson's his emotional involvement, both had a strain of melancholia and Weltschmerz. Cosmos Schmerz? Posted by Mark. Good point, Mark. Spot on with the post-Davidson-Baker Trial of a Time Lord was when I stopped watching. I do feel it turned a corner in its last series of McCoy, but sadly so many viewers had been lost so no one saw it. Myself included, I only saw it years later on UK Gold. And Uncanny is perfect as a description. Russell D. Davies has previous history of writing Who with Damaged Goods, A Virgin New Adventure. I consider it one of the best of the series and have no worries concerning the new series, provided Alan Davies is kept away from the role, says Paul. Thanks, Paul. I could live with Alan Davies, but I'd prefer someone a bit less well known and not so young. It looks like this chap, Bill Nye, is the favourite though, doesn't it? Posted by Mark. Could be Bill. The roles I've seen him in, his hair makes me think of Hartnell. I'd be interested in whoever the actor is. I'm hoping for the family drama that it was when I was little. When it comes out, my daughter will be 5 and I have memories of Who from that age, says Paul. And Christopher has got the role. This is great news, I think. It's from Samantha. Dearie, dearie me, Doctor Who is a wonderful piece of televisual science fiction. It is entertainment. If you're able to read into it some quasi-religious, Freudian, Jungian claptrap, then pity you. As for the Jerry Cornelius references, bollocks. I watched Doctor Who from the first episode and have read all the Cornelius stories/novels and recognise no similarities or recurring themes. Where are the needle guns, heaters, vibro guns? Where is Moorcock's/Jerry's ironic humour, laid-back attitude in Doctor Who? One might see it in Tom Baker's portrayal, but he's hardly a Cornelius Mank, is he? Also, the series may have been in decline before it ended, but Sylvester McCoy was fabulous. Quirky, quixotic even, yet deeply thoughtful and deeply caring about humanity, etc. Davidson period may have been weak in comparison, but falling victim to these self-referential vortices, what the hell does that mean? And Colin Baker may have been the poorest of the Doctors, but was nothing but a palimpsest of empty signifiers. What? And as for what follows, heaven spare us. People, it's a television program, a very good one, but still only entertainment, not necessarily deep or philosophical. By turns, just scary, funny, sentimental, a series of entertaining stories. The end. That's from Paul Eaton-Jones. Thanks for your comments, Paul, but I fear that if you don't like fairly light theoretical analyses of pop culture, then K-punk isn't for you. The Cornelius comparison, well, if you read carefully, then you'll see that the reference is to Jerry Cornelius-style riffs on entropy. I'm sure that you are aware that entropy is a conspicuous theme of the last Tom Baker season, most especially in the last adventure Logopolis. But I hardly think a Cornelius Doctor Who comparison is unwarranted. No similarities or recurring themes between the two? How about time travel, for instance? Also, the connections between Pertwee's dandyism and Cornelius' frock-coated look are fairly evident, I should have thought. Then there's the eternal champion theme, a single character with diverse personae. The themes of renewal and regeneration, the Edwardian references, enormous in both. You yourself make the connection between Tom Baker's ironic humour and Cornelius. As for McCoy, I beg to differ, and it's not as if I'm the first person to dare to suggest that his portrayal of the character was less than compelling. Falling victim to self-referential vortices, I should have thought was fairly clear in meaning from the context. Doctor Who became increasingly concerned with its own past, consuming and regurgitating its own mythology rather than supplementing it or taking it forward. C. Baker as a palimpsest of empty signifiers. Well, it means that he was a collage of stylistic references without any meaning/content. And good God, it's a television program. What are you suggesting? The TV programs I'm analysing have no significance or hidden levels, but nothing can be read into them? I'm afraid I have no sympathy with this snobbery and the impoverished view of culture it implies. That's from Mark K. Punk. September 28th, 2003. I just called to say, I like you. Well, I'm pleased to see that the second episode of Peep Show lived up to the promise of the first. I arrived home slightly the worse for wear, just in time to catch it, so my memory for killer lines and moments of excruciating embarrassment isn't what it might have been. It's as if Chandler and Joey have been transported from New York to Croydon and given an unattractiveness makeover on the trip over. David Mitchell's Mark is a less good-looking, even sadder, even more acerbic pre-Monica Chandler to Robert Webb's Joey without the charm Jeremy. Like Chandler, Mark has some nondescript office job, and like Joey, Jeremy is a between-jobs artist, or a musician rather than an actor. But their relationship is ultimately much more British, more brutish. Unlike Joey and Chandler, Mark and Jeremy have no female friends with whom they feel remotely comfortable. Denied this outlet, their mutual dependence and repressed mutual loathing resembles the desperate Estragon and Vladimir inertia of Steptoe and Son or Hancock and Sid James. Nothing happens forever. In this week's desperate master-slave dialectic, Mark, owed 3 months' rent by Jeremy, swings him an interview for a job as a clerical assistant. Mark's reveries turn to the minor humiliations he will be able to impose on his flatmate if he gets the job. Jeremy, meanwhile, has a difficult task of performing well enough in the interview to convince Mark that he wants the job, whilst ensuring that he doesn't get it. Cue acutely painful interview situation, like when interviews aren't acutely painful, culminating in Jeremy trying to pull his interviewer into the pyramid selling scheme he has just been conned into. Choice moments of horrible revelation. Listless Jeremy, hunting through Mark's stuff while he is at work, searches for porn, and fingering a pile of glossy magazines, he thinks he has hit the motherlode, only to find that they are fantasy gaming magazines. And Mark, still hopelessly pursuing a woman in the office, leaves a message on her answering machine. After rambling ineptly and senselessly for a while, he burbles, I just called to say I like you. September 29th, 2003, Where East is West. Sachs's Limehouse article was the only clue they had, and not a very good one, since he had very carefully avoided naming the places he visited. But to a man intimately familiar with the dock area, the photographs might mean something. Frank stared thoughtfully at a picture of what seemed to be a restaurant, and glanced at the caption beneath, Where East is West. He grinned. There are times, there are places, when everything comes together. The first thing to be distributed on the body without organs are races, cultures, and their gods, Deleuze Guattari and to Oedipus. The Bambi music of Weed Man especially feels like these guys have somehow penetrated via intensive exposure to the degraded forms of video game music and martial arts movie soundtracks, deep into some hardcore of Chinese and Japan musics. All tuned to percussion pings, sploings, tabla-like wibbles, and music concrete plashes. Or if they rediscovered the Chinese ghosts haunting the East End, stumbled unknowing into its hauntological nexus, which is to say, have these East End ghosts discovered, possessed them? Have these producers, channelers, been intoxicated by spirits, inspired? Deleuze Guattari. All delirium is racial, which does not necessarily mean racist. Fiction lives longer than fact. At the mere mention of the name Limehouse, what images bring inevitably to mind? A vista of dark streets, shadowy yellow-faced forms, the brief flash of a knife blade, a scream in the night, a bloated corpse fished up from the murky waters of the Thames. London's Chinatown has long since vanished, but the legend of Limehouse lives on, due in no small part due to the writings of one man, Sax Rohmer. The legend was not always a legend. Before the First World War, it was a fact that the warren of narrow streets and alleyways in the neighbourhood of West India Dock Road, Pennyfields, and Limehouse Causeway formed a no-man's land which honest citizens hesitated to penetrate after dark. It was a fact that the Metropolitan Police honoured the area with double patrols. The precise toll of lives lost in that sombre labyrinth cannot be estimated. The region housed an Asiatic community, firmly entrenched and largely criminal, which lived by laws foreign to and older than the laws of England. This was the secret empire controlled by the fabulous, but fictitious, Dr. Fu Manchu. Was he entirely fictitious? Only Sax Roma, his creator, knew the answer. Laws older than those of England, an Asiatic community, criminal. No need, surely, to labour the gauche racism here, still acceptable in print in 1972, it would seem. Let's dwell instead on the fascination, on the fear, on the delirium. The yellow peril haunts the city's communication networks, the river, the sewers, and within the individual organism itself, the veins. The outside couldn't be closer. It gets in through the Thames, the city's open wound and lifeline, its periphery, opium smuggled into Limehouse docks, then ingested into the city's nervous system. And there are other ways in. Cup of tea, Sir Denis? Deleuze and Guattari. The full body does not represent anything at all. On the contrary, the races and cultures designate regions on this body, that is, zones of intensities, fields of potentials. Ghosts, like fictions, are potentials, ontologically adrift, temporarily displaced, or distemporally placed. 1972, Doctor Who opens up the 1977, Doctor Who opens up the Chinese box. The Talons of Wen Chang is perhaps the best Doctor Who story ever, a steampunk tale, dense with folk and cultural reference, a hyperfictional meditation on London's myths, Pygmalion, I'm Trying to Teach You, Dracula, some slavering gangrenous vampire comes out of the sewers and stalks the city at night, the Phantom of the Opera, especially the Hammer version, the face of Fu Manchu, Jack the Ripper, the good old days, the Lost World. It unravels at a sedate, or should that be sedated, pace, for Doctor and Leela, stumbling through those streets, those myths. Is there a difference? A slow delirium of abductions, disappearance, poisonings, cults, magicians, giant rats, sewers. At the middle of the labyrinth is a time vampire posing as a Chinese god. And there, in the heart of Victorian London, the real star of the thing, a steampunk cyborg, the sinister ventriloquist's dummy Mr. Sin, who is, believe it or not, a computerized homunculus with the brain of a pig. Uncanny enough for you? Comments. Not Doctor Who and the Talons of Wen Chang. Exactly 19 years and 11 months ago, I read that book on an overnight ferry journey. Had to finish it because it wouldn't let me sleep. To this day, the idea of a homunculus can deeply unsettle me. Crisis, pain, imminent danger, catastrophe, nerves, dread, even cosmic dread. These are all fine, but the second I spot something uncanny, I'm gone. Posted by Nick K. Wang Chang was another one of Robert Holmes' genius hammer mutations. Although he hit an early peak of the two Wharton stories, some of the most disturbing material to hit primetime British TV, Robert Holmes is the only successor to Nigel Neal, says Daniel. Which hammer thing was he mutating here, Daniel? Posts Mark. September 30th, 2003, Emerald Peril. Emerald Days further explores the Limehouse ontology. Chronovorus. October 1st, 2003. Yes, Chronovorus. Well, since Doctor Who posted clearly the K-punk equivalent of the sun putting Kylie's ass on the cover, 21 comments on Regeneration Time again, and counting. I propose a K-punk parlor game to run alongside the one started on I Feel Love. We've started thinking there about lines in the sand which the new version should not cross, i.e. no love interest with the Doctor, no TARDIS redesign, no floating Daleks. I propose thinking here about things which the new version should include. My first suggestion is that the focus should be on time rather than space, and by time I don't just mean historical stories, though I'd like to see more of those, or worse, stories about the future, never convincing somehow. The most insuperable problem is fashion. No, I mean stories which foreground the Zenonian paradoxes implicit in the possibility of time travel. There are Zenonian paradoxes implicit in the ordinary conception of time, for that matter. There was, so far as I remember, and I'm sure that someone will correct me if I'm wrong, please do, a disappointing paucity of Doctor Who stories which involve time paradoxes or anomalies. City of Death from the Douglas Adams era strikes me as one of the best stories on this theme. An alien split into 12 personae, each stranded in a different era, mounts a cross-temporal plot involving art forgery, 6 copies of the Mona Lisa. There was the Time Monster from the Pertwee era, regarded by many as reasonable, but which I think of as a delightfully psychedelic curio, Atlantis, the Master, Ingrid Pitt, and a monster called a Chronovore. What a neologism. How could anything involving all those elements be entirely bad? Still, it did little with the Chronovore concept, and the time theme wasn't really explored far beyond a few scenes of hapless unit soldiers being temporarily frozen. October 1st, 2003, Omnisexuality. Jess really excels himself here in his evocation/evisceration of 2 videos he've already also skewered at K-punk, though much less eloquently. Check his description of Beyoncé as a Jimro circus sideshow freak of detachable joints, a writhing horror of multiple motors and gears, all operating independently of each other for full booty impact. She may have an ass like a horse, but here she looks like a bunch of sewn-together doll parts, like Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. And on Christina, Xtina herself seems to find new Wazy every time she appears on TV these days to somehow not be naked and yet be wearing next to nothing. Yet instead of just wearing like underwear or a bikini, she finds the most outlandish ways to straddle, pun sadly intended I'm afraid, the line between dressed and naked. CF, the Daisy Dukes if no sides here. Could he be more right? This connects, in my mind at least, with some remarks of Angus. As Zizek says apropos to the talented Mr. Ripley in a recent LRB piece, a character of no sexuality is actually a lot harder for contemporary audiences to assimilate than one of a perverse but legible sexuality. In our new 50s, omnisexuality is drably de rigueur, hypernormalizing. October 2nd, 2003, just in case there's anyone out there who hasn't. Somewhat superfluous to recommend going over to TWANBOC Twanbok this week because you've already been there, seen the movie, got the t-shirt, right? Comments. Anonymous attack on Matt removed. If you want to abuse other bloggers, do it from your own site. Posted by Anon. Anon, if you feel that way about Ingram, why not tell him rather than K-Punk? Posted by Jed. For God's sake, can't you see Anon's far too busy studying his Jeremy Guscott posted to answer all your spazzy girl woofter questions? Posted by Michael. I'm going to delete this comment when I get home because I don't see why K-Punk should play host to anonymous abuse of another blogger. In the meantime, however, we're all sueds, we're all sad, not corporate financiers of alpha male silverbacks or studs. That's a given. It's something that is often discussed on the blogs in a self-deprecating way. We often refer to it as the nerdosphere, for Christ's sake. And since Anon, or should that be anal, is so pernickety, it's worth pulling him up on the way he has put his lame psychoanalytic argument about sexual frustration. Red collecting is substitute for sexual frustration? Surely not. A substitute for sexual activity, maybe, or an expression of sexual frustration. An expression of sexual frustration, just like the Sistine Chapel and the Mona Lisa, or indeed the whole of civilization and its discontents. Everyone can perform this kind of cod psychoanalysis on everyone else, can't they? What are we to conclude about Anon's obsession with spelling errors, for instance? Incidentally, perhaps if Anon had a blog or admitted to having a blog, we could troll through that and look for spelling and grammar mistakes. What of his fixation on tokens of masculinity, rugby playing, penis size? Was he bullied by his father? Posted by Mark K. Punk. Isn't Anon an amalgam of Onan, the blind sage of antiquity? Posted by Michael. Hilarious. My bet's on Anon being Ingram himself, although that comment about blogs not being interesting or important did appear on Technicolor a few weeks ago. Posted by, doesn't say. Hilarious, my bet's on Anon being Ingram himself, although that comment about blogs not being interesting or important did appear on Technicolor a few weeks ago. Posted by Pete. Be interesting to see Anon's blog or written work if he has any. Hilarious to accuse the rest of us of having nothing to say but not referring us to anything that he might have to say. Parasitism in it. Dissing people anonymously on the net. Hardcore, eh? Posted by John Eden. Plus, I can't imagine anyone who could describe Trambok of not having not enough words. He writes up a storm and his enthusiasm is so infectious. He has turned me on to loads of good music. Right on, hero. As Penman said, though he was talking about Scott Walker, I should be telling Ingram this himself as I remind myself to do, and never actually do. I'm fairly pissed. Posted by Jed. Anon, you are a stupid twat. If you had any guts, you'd paste me on ILM or UK Dance, or I could engage you in discourse, or even just email me yourself. Please, don't. You clearly know fuck all about the internet, because if Mark was bothered enough, he could trace you to your front door via your IP address. From the sterling defense folk have done on my behalf, I can infer you think I'm a major sado. I'm surprised you feel the need to tell me as I spend half the time saying just the same. Sexual frustration? Very true, I can't get enough, mate. Most of all, I'm very fucking embarrassed that you've wasted Mark and John's time. These people are creative geniuses with better things to do than mop up after me. Congratulations. Posted by Matthew Ingram. October 4th, 2003. I need a radio. It's a bit mad living in the environs of London without a decent radio. I'm getting increasingly frustrated being turned on to all this stuff. A, you can only hear on the Pirates, or B, for £8 or a throw, or C, on MP3. Having a Mac means downloading ain't as easily as it could be, too, by the way. Especially keen to hear Simon's Orientalist Darkcore Bliss, and all this colder than cold grime Silver Dollar Circle is chatting about. Brought Deuce online on Simon's recommendation. Super quick and efficient service. Payment via PayPal. Arrives before you can say Jack Robinson. But at least as far as the free CD goes, seems like it was the wrong issue, as Simon admitted. I'm with Simon and Luca on this. Southside Garage, Plastic Man et al. Doesn't cut it for me. There's something 2D and demo-like about it. It's an anti-plateau. Instead of not wanting it to stop, you're forever waiting for it to start. It idles, like the engine of a car stuck in a traffic tailback. Croydon techno with all of the impersonality of techno, but none of its sheen or gleam. None of its sheen or gleam. Concrete grey, asphalt dull, subway anonymous. Comments. If I were you, I'd ask online peeps to trade CD compilations with me. I guess you just did that. I think £8 a throw is disgusting. I'm guessing that as you do all the groundwork of acquiring the subcultural capital, altering your threshold of perception to spot the nascent genre's micro-innovations, you're going to end up in that endless need, another fix situation. I wonder how much of this music will afford satisfying long-term listening relationships. I spend my money on another Naxos disc personally, £5 per full-length CD, current faves that fit the Grimes' hyperbole. It'll bear discs with free Boulez piano sonatas, colder than the coldest, and Hakan Ostbo's Vinched records by Messiaen, multicolored Orientalism that is not just ornamental, naive in the best sense of the word. True Bliss, posted by David. Thanks, Dave. Yes, any tapes or CDs gratefully received. I'll gladly swap for a compilation of John Fox B-sides. As for classical timelessness versus grime now, well, that raises all kinds of issues. Like, why bother with pop at all? I'm sympathetic, but I caught the pop bug so long ago. It's part of my CNS now. Posted by Mark. I can't say I agree with you on that note. Plastic Man stuff is way out there right now, in my opinion. You can dance to it, vibe to it, and even smoke to it. His sets are extremely high energy on rinse, and he's one of the few DJs on Dial who play both grime and forward style and pull it off neatly. Check out his website, www.terrorism.co.uk. I also just finished listening to a mix of his online. It's fucking awesome stuff. http://www.terrorism.co.uk/filthypromo.ram, posted by Dave Hughes. If you have a Mac and you need a radio, you might consider getting one of these. http://www.griffintechnology.com/product/radioshark/ It basically plugs into a USB port and turns your computer into a TiVo for radio. Then you can encode all those lovely pirate stations and share them with those of in faraway lands. Posted by Non. Big up plastic. I'm from South, born and raised. The one on a playground is where I spent most of my... But serious, I've met Plastic a couple times now, true mutual peeps. I've seen him about since he was young, before all the hype, and he may look a bit bait in a shubs under ends, but, and that's a bigger but than grandma's, he's got soul. I heard one bray say, he's not white man, he's clear get me, so don't get it twisted, he's representing for all of us down here, as we pronounce it. My guy's making bets for every man to spit on, and his promotions are putting us local MCs back into club like 50. So no hatin' mo ratin' Z please. Messier reporting live from the South Pole, from Messier. October 50,003. I don't know whether to laugh or cry. Now I have the pallor of the lower middle class, the self-defeating approach to life, the belief it stops here with lifelessness. I don't know why they have an illness called depression. That's just being lower middle class, isn't it? The intelligence but not the confidence to express it, the rising anger that rarely erupts. From Sean's blog, Crumbling Loaf. Crumbling Loaf has made an art of too close to the bone, painfully funny, funnily painful posts. Nothing much happens, over and over again, forever. The real secret life of a generation of sad, not lad males, dissolutely unable to focus on any clear goals, but unable to relinquish the ghost of ambition, but desire to do something. But what else? I must go on. I can't go on. You know the drill. The tantalizing feeling of waiting for a train that left years ago, of waiting interminably when you know you should have arrived long ago. Crumbling Loaf is like the interior monologues of the characters in Peep Show. Sample from Friday's episode. Mark wandering around the supermarket. Life is full of pain, desolation. Why do we pretend otherwise? Spots a tin on special offer. Ooh, look, 33% off. The lurching between a total existential void and the comforting lure of trivia. Crumbling Loaf renders that horribly familiar experience all too vividly. Oh, for God's sake, I don't know why they have an illness called depression. That's just being lower middle class, isn't it? The horror of a decent education, the hell of a secure upbringing, the psychic abyss of not suffering from malnutrition or MDRTB. Bring back national service, posted by Daniel. Hey Daniel, I think you're being a little bit humorless here. I take it that Sean's remark was meant in jest. Plus, aren't you being a bit quick? Are you saying that working class people don't have a secure upbringing, or that victims of malnutrition do suffer from depression? Isn't widespread depression partly a consequence of not having a struggle to survive? CF Radiohead, who seemed to sum up this syndrome of the non-warrior male. Posted by Mark. I was being unfair and also trying to bait, but humorless? The ennui was just getting too much. I do find the last comment interesting though. It may be true in part. As more tangible problems recede in importance, the intangible shifts into the foreground. Posted by Daniel. October 50,003. Prog. Moi? I reckon the blog phenomenon is now entering its own early 1970s. If that means we're out of the 60s, great. Speaking of the early 70s, great old style in every way, wire piece on Miles Jack Johnson sessions in the current issue for those who ain't seen it, and Ian's roundup of the Japan reissues. But when is Ian going to reappear? K-Punky was made to Peter Hamill. Funnily enough, I spent a while on LimeWire in the summer trying to track down VDGG and Hamill stuff. I liked what I heard, but didn't know where to begin really, and LimeWire is shit. Anyone got any suggestions about what is the best place to start? Hi, Mark. VDGG. Porn Hearts is the one. Then Least We Can Do. Vital. God Bluff. Solo Hamill. Silent Corner in the Empty Stage. In Camera. He's released zillions of solo discs since then, so they've become difficult to keep track of. Posted by Ray. So I take it that, like me, you think that being equated to VDGG is a good thing, Ray? Posted by Mark. I used to be really into VDGG. A girl my brother knows is the daughter of Keith Ellis, particularly H to He, early album. Not into them at all nowadays. Hamill is a good analogy, very complimentary, saxes and all. Posted by Scott. I def second Ray and Scott's recommendations of VDGG, particularly H to He, great album. Solo Hamill, I'd be heading straight for the 78/79 era stuff, particularly PH7, The Future Now. Seem to recall these being wonderful records. Maybe earlier titles, In Camera. A mate of mine, from when I was about 15/16, used to send me tapes of prog. He was a seasoned prog veteran. Out of all that stuff, Genesis, Crimson, etc., the teenage me only really dug the VDGG/Hamill solo gear. But yeah, being equated to VGG is a great thing. Hamill is probably one of the very few artists from that era that still feels vital, even if I don't check out his new discs at all. Posted by John. There was a useful single disc compilation of VDGG stuff released about 3 years ago, spanning the whole career. Probably the best way to get into them. Hamill's solo career I know nothing about. Posted by James Russell. Confidence, God knows from what album. Sofa Sound is his side. Saw him a year or so ago and thought, this is a bit too much like art for me. Posted by Sean. October 5th, 2003. Love to Fluv. K-Punk joins the chorus of approval for the truly excellent Tooth Love. Wish he/she'd break up her paragraphs a bit though. What's I Feel Love in the prog blog stakes? Rush? Any suggestions, Angus? And A Time for Fear? I think I Feel Love, the blog, is probably the Carpenters, actually. I don't know which blog is equivalent to I Feel Love, the song, but I suppose it's early days, or only in the early 1970s. Sooner or later a blog will come along that's entirely written by robots, but also really sexy and moody. It will turn our world upside down. Posted by Angus. Carpenters aren't really prog, though, are they? How about Elton, since Matt mentioned him? A definite compliment given Marcelo's recent rehabilitation of Rage. Posted by Mark K-Punk. Certainly I'll settle for Elton. Posted by Angus. I was thinking early T-Rex, or Titter. Pink Floyd for Angus. Posted by Matthew. October 7th, 2003. Problog. Me with his version of the Progblog Pantheon. K-Punk, King Crimson, Machu, erudition around a solid rhythmic bass, but any more of Dr. Fucking Who and you're the Enid, got it? The Enid it is then. Afrofuturism equals black prog. Codwell Ashon equals yes fan. Worse than that, he likes Roger Dean. Uh-oh, so does someone else. Sort of relieved to have avoided all prog comparisons. Here with Heisman's and the Medievalists and JFK during the Cuban Missile Crisis. If Arnold becomes governor of California, J.G. Ballard is forever redundant, if he's not already. Do bloggers go to the fair? There's a fair in Stamford Hill if anyone fancies it. Excellent. Anyway, I'll be on the waltzes alone, going round and round and round and round and round and round and round, then sitting down and stuffing candy floss like a big pink pig. Posted by Oliver. Time for Fear. Phil Manzanera/Quiet Sun. That flowing mane, angular and serious but with a heart of pop, and you mutate into this heat. Love bombs away. Posted by Matthew. More Roger Dean respect, please. Posted by JD. You'll get no Roger Dean respect here, I'm afraid. I mean, you can rehabilitate some things, but fuck, I draw the line there. Oliver, looks like you haven't, after all, escaped for progging. Never mind becoming like a pink pig. What you need to join the prog gang is a giant inflatable pig. Posted by Mark. Damn it, Math. Posted by Oliver. Dean replaced parts of drawings with flat colours in angular, almost abstract shapes. Uriah Heep's The Magician's Birthday, for example. So couldn't you argue K-Punk style that he eventually influenced such beloved covers as Boy in the Corner? Posted by JD. Dean replaced parts of drawings with flat colours in angular, almost abstract shapes. I think this is what Kodo likes about him, to be fair to K.E. That and then in mechanical forms. Still cuts no ice with me, though. By Mark K-Punk. So am I the only one who loves him mostly for the solar sailboats? Posted by JD. October 8th, 2003. Space, Time, Light, All the Essentials. J.G. Ballard season, BBC 4. Like his admirer John Baudrillard, Ballard has for a long time resembled a rogue AI, repermutating the same few themes ad infinitum, occasionally adding a sprinkling of contemporary detail to freshen up a limited repertoire of fixations. Fixations, appropriate since, after all, Ballard's obsession is obsession. In the BBC4 profile, nothing new here, the old man gamely and tirelessly going over his favourite riffs, once again, Ballard repeated one of his familiar but still powerfully sobering observations. People often comment on how extreme his early life was, Ballard said. Yet far from being extreme, that early life, beset by hunger, fear, war, and the constant threat of death, is the default condition for most human beings on the planet, now and in every previous century. It is the comfortable life of the western suburbanite which is in every way the planetary exception. Thus Home, BBC4's brilliant adaptation of Ballard's short story The Enormous Space. Home is the kind of thing the BBC used to excel at, drama that was genuinely, unsettlingly weird without being insufferably, unwatchably experimental. Not that Home has much hope of appealing to popular taste stuck away on BBC4, of course, a sign of the times. Home revealed itself to be a perverse cousin of the suburban dropout situation comedy, The Good Life, or The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin, spliced with Polanski's Repulsion. No surprise to see director Richard Curtin Smith name-checking Polanski as an influence. Anthony Sher was superbly, charmingly unhinged as Gerald Ballantyne, an accident victim who, instead of returning to work after his convalescence, decides to embark upon an experiment. Decides is no doubt too active a word. In every respect the typical Ballard character, Jerry discovers rather than initiates, finds himself drawn into a logic he is compelled to investigate. Many ways a faithful Freudian, Ballard has no doubt that obsession always has/is a logic. The experiment, it turns out, has a simple premise. Jerry will stay indoors indefinitely, living off the supplies of his well-stocked larder and freezer until what? Well, that is what the experiment will establish. Can he survive by using his front door as a weapon? What unfolds is the descent into the maelstrom Ballard has explored since High Rise and Concrete Island, a quest to the outer edges of the human that follows a well-defined sequence, whose stages can be readily enumerated. A letting go of the old identity. This is given up easily. Ballard's twist on the disaster novel as far back as The Drowned World lay in the readiness of his characters to embrace rather than resist the new conditions which catastrophe had visited upon them. Ever since High Rise, Ballard has seen characters going one step further, actually initiating disaster as a revolt, not so much against conformity as against air-conditioned comfort. Here, Jerry burns all his correspondence, his photographs, then his birth certificate, and, in the most sacrilegious act of all, which made mortified my Protestant soul, his money. The loosening of the hold on civilization. Bataille phase. Ballard is endlessly rewriting civilization and its discontents, and his fictions are attempts to imagine a libidinal utopia in which the payoff between survival and repression, spelled out by Freud's mordant pessimism, is somehow circumvented. The return to savagery, even the experiencing of raw hunger pangs, are eagerly savoured opportunities to relax civilization's impulse control and neutralizing of affect. In Home, when Jerry's conventional food supplies are running low, he turns first to the flowers in his garden and then to his neighbour's pets. The scene in which Jerry's neighbour questions him, in that middle-class ever-so-slightly insinuating way, about the disappearance of his dog Mr. Fred and his wife's cat is a masterpiece of grisly comedy. Perhaps they've eloped, Cher gibbers, by then constantly on the edge of all but ineligible hysteria. Laughter, a strange, snorting, sniffling chortlet he can barely contain. It is that laughter which signals more than anything else that Gerald has left polite society, never to return. The exploration of the transcendental beyond, Kant/Blake phase. I mean transcendental in its strict Kantian sense, of course. Ballard likes to refer to this as his exploration of inner space, but I've always found this to be a profoundly misleading description. Much more than astronauts floating in empirical space, it is the outer which Ballard's suburban cosmonauts investigate. While they confront is time and space themselves as preconditions of all perceptions and experiences, and while their explorations open up as an intensive zone beyond, outside, standard perceptual thresholds. Hence, Home becomes an aberrant version of the incredible Shrinking Man. Cut off from the world beyond his door, I refuse to call it the outside world, Jerry's sense of space massively expands. The rooms are getting bigger. The Arctic becomes an Antarctic white world of blank, freezer-burning vastness, the eruption of the transcendental outside into the empirical interior of the Home, now very cosmos, teeming of texture and previously unsuspected detail. I feel like an explorer or an astronaut. Curtin Smith's use of the video diary format gives the film a queasy intimacy and a suitably unheimlich relation to the pop TV now, something underscored by Jerry's sign-off remarks about undertaking the ultimate home makeover. Yes, that's one way to make the most of your space. The man whose head expanded. Are you on drugs, Gerald? And self-denial, starving, the withdrawal from company, it's all very topical. I wonder, I hope, something Gerald-like is going on in David Blaine's head right now. Comments. How did BBC4 do it on an annual budget of threepence? Documentary on the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, Sunday, October 19th, 9 to 10 p.m. repeated 1:19 a.m., posted by Michael. What would we do without you, Michael? Thanks for the information, posted by Mark. You'll have them thinking I look like David Williams, posted by Michael. Sorry, you've lost me a bit there, posted by Mark K. Punk. He played Jeff Lurky Monks, the obsessive solicitous-looking organizer of a Children of the Stones cruise convention in Cruise of the Gods. Steve Coogan also starred, posted by Michael. Yeah, I'm with you now, Squire. Saw that, yes. A bit disappointing, I thought, posted by Mark K. Punk. Partially penned by Bainham. Curiously enough, it's one of the few comedy dramas set aboard an ocean liner actually written by someone licensed to pilot one, posted by Michael. Lol, one of the few. You mean there are more? Posted by Mark. Think of it in terms of a modified Drake equation. If we multiply the number of Navy and merchant seamen, tens, possibly hundreds of millions, by the fraction to have obtained a pilot's license, by the fraction with an interest in the arts and dramaturgy, by the fraction pursuing popular comedy, by the fraction which would consider large ocean-going vessels a suitable vehicle for popular comedy, then we already have a figure in the tens of thousands, posted by Michael. Maybe so, and maths isn't my strong point, I'll admit, but surely the amount of comedy dramas is strictly limited to something in the hundreds at most, and the number of those set on ocean liners is even more limited. The number of those also written by someone who is licensed to pilot such a ship is even more limited. I'd wager that we're left with a figure approximate to 1, posted by Mark. But if you were to multiply your end figure by the number of stars in the Milky Way galaxy, by the fraction of stars of planetary systems, by the number of planets per star capable of sustaining life, by the fraction of those planets where life actually arises, by the fraction of all intelligent life, then light-hearted shipbound comedies by former senior crewmen become the rule rather than the exception. Posted by Michael. October 8th, 2003. Okay, I'll bite. Even though Scott has said it all. Homegrown music is more exciting than any time since Britpop. That exciting, eh? 3 words. British Sea Power. Yep, that exciting. Comments. Actually, British Sea Power okay, and that new single of theirs would have fitted very nicely on Lamb Lies Down, or either of the first 2 Edgar Broughton Band albums. Actually, much of the regressive rock of C86 vintage was okay as well, but I do feel that us bloggers need to engage in a lot more nowness, because otherwise if we're just going to sit around and talk about 30-year-old prog rock record/artists, then what's the qualitative difference between the blogosphere and, say, Mojo or Hornby, or for that matter, jazz journals still thinking it's 1945 and Peanuts Hucker was where it's at? I don't mean to be mean, it's just that as a punter/reader, the blogosphere these days is bearing an increasing resemblance to the Bob Harris message board. COM was teetering on the brink of becoming that as well, which is one of the subsidiary reasons why I decided to stop doing it. It's just that if someone googled any of these blogs right now, they'd find animated discussions about Genesis and the Groundhogs, and whatever residue of 76 is left in me feels that this was somehow not the point, or worse, you'd get our friend Anon banging on boringly about boring old hipster hacks. Although one could argue that Trevor Horn's work on the astonishing new Bell and Sebastian album, or should that astonishing apply to Trevor Horn, has in some senses united all of these musical/aesthetic strands together, and more subtly than you'd initially imagine. Still, I see that meme has labelled COM reluctantly as the Nick Drake of prog blogs, which I suppose is historically and aesthetically correct. I would sneakily kind of prefer Roy Harper, but not to the point, you understand, where I'd have to go out and kiss a sheep and contact hepatitis. Not going to rake over the past versus present thing. Can't for the life of me understand why the two considered mutually exclusive. As for this harking after 1976, well, the only meaningful watershed of that era from the perspective of today is Pill, not the Sex Pistols. What was Johnny Rotten listening to? Hamill, Coyne, Can, Captain Beefheart, Dr. Alimantado. Also getting a wee bit bored of all this criticism of the blogs. Marcello in danger of becoming our Margaret Thatcher, Mr. Major, Mr. Haig, Mr. Duncan Smith, it was also much more invigorating in my day. And this to other naysays, if yous don't like 'em, don't read 'em, and if yous think you can do better, have a crack. Do something creative, it's a level playing field. The wars which rage in Mark's comments box. Posted by Matthew, perhaps if you could stop talking like a Dalek or a 1986 enemy letters page editor for a while, then we might get somewhere. In any case, the Sex Pistols existed in 1976 and Pill did not, so that meaningful perspective is actually, when you look at it, meaningless. I didn't say I was harking after 1976, nor that past and present could not mutually coexist. Read my comments again and pay particular attention to the 4th paragraph. And another thing, Matthew, cool it with the arrogance trip. Your blog is an entertaining blog, and you're a decent enough writer, but there are many other writers and bloggers on the internet who are equal to and better than you. You're not as great as you evidently consider yourself to be. Personally, I'm rather bored with the knee-jerk, if you don't like it, read it or do it better yourself reaction. And I think, Matthew, you're capable of better than this. Posted by Marcelo Carlin. I'm no writer and don't think my sentiments are arrogant either. I don't see why you're so keen to slag off what people are doing. My comment the other day about the phenomenon entering the 70s was a joke. Dialect, seeing as this is a K-Punk comments box, I'll take that as a compliment. Posted by Matthew. No disrespect to Marcelo intended. I've said the same thing before. When I get my code, I won't be slagging the whole thing off. http://www.hollowearth.org/blog_0203.html. I'll admit to being doubly puzzled as I can think of no one who has turned this form into such a triumphant success. Why pack up like this? The same thing applied to It's All in My Mind, who finished by writing off everyone's efforts. Posted by Matthew. I'm not sure I get where you are coming from, Marcelo. It's not as if the whole blog moss has devoted itself forever in its entirety to talking about prog or indeed the past. Prog has only come up as a topic of discussion in the last few days, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression that the discussion has been undertaken in a humorous spirit. I don't know whose blog is entirely or even predominantly past-focused. None that are on the K-Punk's links bar, and that naturally includes COM. The idea that it was in any way in danger of becoming the Bob Harris message board is inaccurate to the point of perversity. Quite the opposite, in common with many of the blogs. Its strength, in fact, was the way it provided a new context for old records and vice versa. Those blogs which don't do that, incidentally, are the ones, like Herringbone and Tough Love, which are entirely now-focused. Where else, apart from in places like Deuce, is there a sustained discussion of grime? The Guardian blog piece was surely right about DR's hike in critical status being due in no small part to the blogs. And what of another blog course celebrated, the Junior Boys, who are absolutely pop, absolutely now, and have been discussed hereabouts for months now, and their debut record has only just been released this week. In any case, there's nothing wrong with talking about the past. Pretending that the present is new just because it is now, that's the danger. No one in our tiny corner of the blog moss is making that mistake. After all, Mojo and Hornby aren't the problem, really. NME is. It's NME, not the blogs, read as like a trad jazz journal. I'm stunned whenever I look at the cover, amazed at how it manages to repermutate the same few retro rockists apparently infinitely. At a certain point, and C86 remains the fall from grace as far as I am concerned, the modernist impulse in white rock slackened into a tolerance for retroism. At least prog was modernist, which makes me prefer it to regressive rock, which, as far as I'm concerned, and of course I speak only for myself, not from the assumed objectivity of some Olympian heights, was actually not okay, but one of the most depressing, empty, and draining pop trends ever. Ditto British Sea Power, whose only saving grace is a vocalist silly enough to give their inept, arrhythmic guitar plot a tinge of absurdity. Is it worse to talk about The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway, or to make, in 2003, a single that would happily fit onto it? I know what I think. Matthew, you know full well why COM stopped. You've been told enough times, on-site and off, and nobody's writing off anybody's efforts, but why should anyone's writing in a public forum be immunized or protected against criticism? We can all become better writers, even if you claim not to be a writer. That is how you are perceived by the blog community, if there is such a thing. Communities, as Tom says, are defined by whom they let in as much as who aim to be let in, as much as those who aim to be let in. And it's a truism, and not said maliciously. Bear in mind that those who can't take criticism shouldn't be writing in public. You're going to get it wherever you write, Matthew, I'm afraid, whether it's in Twanbok or The Wire or The Guardian. It comes with the territory. If some bloggers cease to find other blogs interesting, of course, if they don't like them to begin with, then they will generally say so. My suggestion as a reader is perhaps to talk about other things. Talk about how Trevor Horn has magically squared the circle between C86 and The Art of Noise on the new Bell and Sebastian album. Talk about why the Pitman album is 200 times sharper and better than the Dizzy Rascal album, even though there's not a note on it which couldn't have been recorded in 1987. I've retired now. I don't see why it should always be my responsibility to write something interesting about a subject in order to read something interesting about a subject. Why should it always be my responsibility to write something interesting about a subject in order to read something interesting about a subject? Or perhaps think about why Spizazz and War Against Silence are on COM's lists of links and you are not. What are they doing? Where are they reaching that Twanbok isn't? From Marcelo Carlin. Or Mark, perhaps talk about why, if regressive rock was so depressing, empty, and draining, a pop trend, how come it helped begat Nirvana? Posted by Marcelo Carlin. With the greatest of respect, Marcelo, I ain't about to tips on who or what I talk about from anyone. I may write like a donkey, but I sure as hell don't need fashion tips. It's not criticism of me I object to. I'm no untouchable Ollie cow. I get pilloried all the time. It's the knee-jerk slagging off of the community that irks me. Posted by Matthew. Well, Mark, perhaps talk about why if regressive rock was so depressing, empty, and draining a pop trend, how come it helped begat Nirvana? This is a rhetorical question, right? What are you suggesting? That depression, emptiness, and the feeling of being drained are wholly foreign to Nirvana? What separates out Nirvana from their alleged reg rock forebears is their rage about their predicament. Where reg rock was ahistorical, for Nirvana history was an affliction, a terrible weight that they knew they could neither carry nor shift, still less ignore. Where reg rock simply was depressing, Nirvana, in fematizing their depression, in auto-immolating the barely animate zombie remains of rock, made of their discontent something exhilarating, something dramatic. They tried and failed to live with the awareness that rock was over, that they were living in its no future afterburn. I must go on, I can't go on, I'll shoot myself in the head. But I wrote about this 8 years ago. Posted by, I assume, Mark Fisher, K-Punk. Perhaps think about why Spizaz and War Against Silence are on COM's lists of links and you are not. What are they doing? Where are they reaching that Twombok isn't? Bad vibes, posted by Matthew. Marcelo, but I do feel that us bloggers need to engage in a lot more nowness. So your definition of nowness includes deep analysis of if Elton John's back catalogue. Okay, so he's riding high in the charts of a 25-year-old tune at the moment, but it's hardly cutting-edge subject matter, is it? Actually, I quite like Song for Guy and Ego too, and I enjoyed your musings on the subject, but that's beside the point. I shall continue to report on new stuff and reminisce about old stuff in equal measure, because I'm primarily blogging for my own entertainment and couldn't care what anyone thinks is the correct way to do it. Love to Twanbok and K-Punk. My blog as, posted by Nick. If anyone else likes it, it's a bonus. You really don't understand, do you? Posted by Marcelo Carlin. Obviously not. Posted by Nick. October 8th, 2003. Note to self. There will be a response to Simon's 60s thing. October 8th, 2003. Could this be the biggest understatement of all time? Bear in mind that there's loads of indulgent wank in these records. Still better indulgent wank than British Sea Power. Better anything than British Sea Power. Actually, wasn't it the anemic, resolutely non-indulgent tedium of regressive rock, Reynolds, that led to the partial rehabilitation of prog? On the grounds that, like, it might have been bad, but nothing can be as bad as this? October 9th, 2003. Beyond a joke. Now it's fucking Frampton. Everything I know about him, which is very little, I gleaned from The Simpsons. Thanks for the link, though, Nick. Sorry about that, mate. I'm just jealous. Posted by Nick. Why? You're new. I'm Frampton. Posted by Mark. October 9th, 2003. A pressure cooker. Chilling parable here from the Luke Meister. A coldly autumnal anecdote brought to life by Luke's unfailing ability to make banality of evil crackle with poetry. And they say the blogosphere is dead. October 9th, 2003. Idol thoughts. They're fucking rough, those pop idol contestants, aren't they? Sean, whose mordant comic genius is now starting to get the props it deserves. Not as rough as Kate Thornton, though. Hey Mark, comments are greatly appreciated. Posted by Sean. No problem, Sean. Your flavour of the month might anyway. Emerald Days, Some Disco, Auspicious Fish. It's all in my mind. They're all checking ya. Posted by Mark. Yes, the working class is always good for a cheap laugh from grammar school boys, aren't they? Almost as bad as the Guardian Guide on a Saturday. Posted by Marcelo Carlin. I'm a bit baffled here. Who is a grammar school boy? Is Kate Thornton working class? Posted by Mark K-Punk. Quack Quack. Posted by The Dark. October 11th, 2003. Shoot that poison arrow through my heart. I've been wanting to respond to this post of Gita's for a while now. Gita is calling for a full-blown new pop revival and decries the arid artiness of much micro house. While naturally I concur with Gita's drift, I'd quibble a little, perhaps pedantically, with her terms. I'd say that what bedevils pop now is its lack of artiness. There's a surfeit of tastefulness in certain genres for sure, but I wonder if that isn't something they share with new pop. Perhaps this illustrates K-Punk's deviation from the gospel according to popism. New pop may have been the moment where pop ceased to wear its art on its sleeve. At a certain point, new pop and new romance could appear all but indistinguishable. Too crass and simplistic to say that new pop repudiated artiness, but its play with the refurbished signifiers of simple pop pleasures militated against art pop's complications, which it sublimated, or better, superlimated into the illusion of pure surface. Nothing illustrates this more than the group which partly prompted Gita's musings, ABC. Despite being a fan at the time, ABC were the first band I saw live. I find them almost unlistenable now. Like most of Horn's productions, monumentally impressive to exactly the same degree that they are uninvolving, and for exactly the same reasons. ABC leave me cold. ABC are not art pop, but designer pop. Something that could be said of most of Horn's work, actually. Fry's fastidious connoisseurship fitted naturally with Horn's affectless, dispassionate sound construction. The Lexicon of Love was a meta-classic album in that it eschewed the modish and the modernist in favour of the timeless. An album that, although it was composed of nothing but simulations of the past, was utterly disengaged from history. The obvious contrast is with Japan, the last of the art popsters. Unlike ABC, Japan were modernists. No attempt to recapitulate to some notion of the pop classic. They pushed on, sons of pioneers, dissatisfied with anything that wasn't novel. I've bemoaned Sylvian's subsequent lapse into taste before. What kept taste at bay in Japan was the spectre of glam, which is still something to be negotiated with, even at the end. Glam is anti-taste incarnate, a vulgar sublime refusal of beauty's proportion, as much as it is a rejection of the everyday's drabness. Glam's dressing up was never an aspiration to attain classic style. On the contrary, in fact, it was always an unsettling of perfect form, a trash apotheosis. In that respect, Dino, the fly in the ointment, might have been more glam than Ferry, who was always prone to conspicuous displays of taste. Eloquent and lovely, Mark K. Punk. I'll be responding to this one soon. Posted by Geeta. Thanks, Geeta. Really enjoying original soundtrack, needless to say. Posted by Mark K. Punk. October 11th, 2003. Cleanliness is next to deathliness. I have come to the conclusion, after a long period of arduous research, that other people, that is, everyone other than me, must spend most of their domestic time cleaning up and cleaning their houses. Either that or they cleared up once and they never did anything. Crumbling loaf, permalink screwed, so can't link directly to the post. Scroll down, it's the September 11th entry. Yes, it struck me that one of the most subversive things about Fight Club was that it showed a dirty house, something one almost never sees on TV. No matter how supposedly gritty the drama, everyone's house is not only sparklingly clean, it's also disturbingly tidy. Lack of cleanliness is so socially unacceptable, it's not even representable. October 11th, 2003. Gloomcore for next Bloggers Night Out. Opportunities to experience mover-style gloomcore for a big system in the midst of a headstrong throng of drug-fucked dark rave zombie warriors, stomping till the crack of dawn and beyond, do not come along too often these days. I would go if I were you. Up for it, boys? Think of the content-absorbing opportunities. I feel a rush just thinking about it. Suspiria is amazing, all sinister whimsy, toy keyboards, whispering voices and kettle drums. I'll send anyone a copy. Well, I say a hearty yes to both offers. Anyone else for the Gloomcore? Not Lucasine, I suppose, but Ingram, this must be one for you. And Kilroy, what do you say? Comments. That boys in Boys Up for It Boys is very telling. Posted by Marcelo Carlin. Gloomcore, I'm up for it, but only if I can turn up in drag. Posted by Nick K. Well, I'll be bringing girls. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Come to Mouse on Mars this Friday, 17th of October, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. at, unfortunately, the end in town. See http://www.worldsofpossibility.com. Posted by Mike. Mike, I helping them out with the nights. I'll be around all evening. Posted by Nick K. October 13th, 2003. Corporate EU Lent. A number of our recent discussion topics coalesced in a quite astonishing piece today in The Observer on the Man U vs England standoff. Remember that discussion a while back between K-Punk and Blissblog on territoriality and capital, when Simon was positioning Grimes' ultra-locality as a kind of dirty protest against the clean sheen of a deracinated global capital? Remember what, following Robin Carmody, I was saying yesterday about 80s AOR signalling that a certain version/vision of Englishness had capitulated to the dollar? Well, here is one Richard Kurt, deputy editor of the Red Issue magazine. The fundamental thing is that Manchester United see themselves as an international, multinational club, not a provincial city club. We are a globally visioned brand. We're not about England, but about the world. Nationality doesn't matter. Till recently, the FA was as hierarchically class stratified as the House of Lords. I think I'm right in saying that members of the Admiralty used to sit on important committees as a matter of course. The confrontation this week between the FA and United, with the England players caught somewhat ingloriously in between, was a face-off between a multinational PLC and a national institution, with the national institution cast in the role of stick-in-the-mud resistors to modernisation. Alex Ferguson occupies an ambivalent position here. This week he found himself for once aligned with the board and the PLC, yet Ferguson, whose style is routinely contrasted not only with that of the coolly analytic Ericsson, but also with that of the similarly phlegmatic Arsene Wegener, is famously the last bastion of an archaic British version of management, which the club is run not as the jewel in the crown of a corporate folio, but as a personal fiefdom. The professorial professional class Wenger and Ericsson, softly spoken, polite, PR-sensitive, are well-heeled representatives of the European bourgeoisie. The irascible Ferguson, meanwhile, prides himself on his upstart status as a former Clydeside shop steward made good. The point is to make it without becoming one of them. In that respect, one of the many striking things about Kurt's comments is their strange disconnection from the national makeup of the United team. Unlike that of chief rivals Arsenal, the backbone of the United squad is predominantly English. That plus Ferdinand, the Neville brothers, Scholes, but it's the likes of Van Nistelrooy and Solskjaer who are the exceptions in a squad that has, for the most part, been put together in the old-fashioned way, through careful husbandry of homegrown talent. Van Nistelrooy is one of the few foreign big names Ferguson has brought in and retained. Ferguson's experiment with the slow-burn Latin sorcery of little witch Juan Sebastian Veron was prematurely terminated, reinforcing United's essential Englishness. Scholes, but their very names are redolent of the prosaic, pragmatic Anglo-proletarianism Ferguson favours. resolutely unglamorous Phil Neville, who looks like he should be cringing about in an Alan Bennett play rather than representing a globally visioned brand, is perhaps the most authentic face of Ferguson's United. Ferguson's sale of Beckham, after all, was something of a thumbing off the nose at the globally visioned brand cultivated by the PLC. Beckham was the only United player, the only footballer, with genuinely global appeal, exactly the kind of asset a global brand would want to hold on to. Beckham, whose background is of course as working class as they come, had nevertheless become associated with an aspirational cosmopolitan classlessness subtly at odds of Ferguson's vision of success as class revenge. Be successful, but don't forget who you are, and don't let them forget who you are. In effect, then, there are three forces in tension here, in a plot of Shakespearean intrigue. Ferguson's United, which far from being impersonally cosmopolitan, is made in the manager's image. A family, as another Observer report had it, the United PLC, whose interests, as Ferguson is well aware, are only contingently coincident with his own, and the FA. Little of this emerges in Kurt's picture, which elides Ferguson's United with the PLC. One would expect a corporate lackey to spout the kind of bland brand speak Kurt happily spools out on behalf of the board. It's quite another thing to hear a fan toe the party line, chillingly and appallingly reminiscent of those sad call centre employees interviewed by the aghast Darkus Howe a year or so back in his memorable documentary, who unquestioningly subordinated themselves to the sinister smiling corporate ethos of the Egg Online Bank. Kurt's comments have very little relevance to the United team, but everything to do with how a certain type of United fan sees themselves. At Leicester 2 weeks ago there were 6 or 7 songs, particularly Are You England in Disguise, and the Leicester fans reacted strongly. Leicester is an England supporting city, and that's the sort of people, flag of St George waving, Little England, sun reading people, that we want to wind up. We'd sing them at West Ham, Leeds, Newcastle, places like that. It is political, but it's also sophisticated. I'm quite proud of it. The fit between a left liberal social agenda, anti-nationalism and pro-capitalism is, it would seem, complete. Locality. Leicester is equated with a territoriality that is unreflective, unsophisticated and fascistic. Leicester is in fact an ethnically diverse city, home to much Desi beats. The alleged sophistication of Kurt's United fan is, in his account, a consequence of their informed consumption. Leicester fans support Leicester. Dullards that they are, just because they were born there, but United fans have selected United in the same way that a discriminating palate might settle upon a vintage wine, their choice reflecting an exercise of informed judgment rather than instinctual atavism. On the one hand, we are led to believe we have the stubbornly archaic, pre-capitalistic territorialities of the local community team and the meta-local national team. On the other hand, the brave new world of the ethnically diverse Champions League pursuing capital utopia, in which national rivalry is a thing of the past. Incidentally, I wonder where Mr. Kurt comes from. Too easy to equate locality and localism with fascism and internationalism with sophistication. As Simon's analysis of Grime has shown, such a simple binary can hardly be adequate. The seedier side of capital has come out in the other big football story this week. Whatever the truth of this particular story, it's clear that many footballers are now literally capital's id running wild, a kind of personification of its won't take no for an answer voraciousness. The combination of fabulous wealth, alcohol, and male hormones have produced a lawless libidinal monstrosity, a breed of young man as casually convinced of their immunity from prosecution as were medieval princes. Forget Kurt's corporate brochure. That scene in the hotel bedroom is the grim reality of contemporary capital, a heady brew of seduction, desire, and brutality. If it wants you, it's got you, no matter what. Comment. Wonderful stuff on my Observer comments. I come from Manchester, by the way, and I meant the terms global brand etc. to be tongue-in-cheek, a deliberate aping of the corpse-speak spouted by PLC suits. As, for once, there is a certain chiming between their vision and my view. What's wrong with cosmopolitanism, though? And yes, choosing United by reference to its core values, not its trophy, seems to be perfectly proper and to be encouraged. Curious as to you. By Richard Kurt. October 13th, 2003. Mea culpa. Accidentally deleted the Genesis/Gabriel post along with the comments. How stupid was that? Apologies to everyone who took the trouble to make a comment. Dispatched without the comments via email. Posted by Michael. Michael, you are a star, but you already know that. Posted by Mark K. Punk. October 13th, 2003. Selling Englishness for the dollar. Slight return. It's back, thanks to a perfect angel, Mr. Michael Carr. Sadly, the comments are unrecoverable. Well, we agree on one thing. Gabriel's sledgehammer was the end of something. But of what, precisely? If I was to date the utter end of the 60s in music terms to a single record, it might be Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer. Those albums around Games Without Frontier and Shock the Money were his post-punk efforts. Paranoia, Alienation, No Cymbals on the Drums. Sledgehammer is him selling out to the 80s. That burnished, airless Go West beige funk sound. Is there a record more emblematic of the 80s, the post-82 80s, the post-punk 80s, than that? The bright and breezy, brassy, stodgy 80s soul sound, horribly like Go West. That awful played every 5 minutes, conspicuously expensive video. It's like being trapped in a shopping mall on Saturday afternoon. Forever. In an interesting post on House at World's End, Robin Carmody develops Simon's argument, pointing out that Sledgehammer and Invisible Touch were consecutive US number ones around the time of Andrew and Fergie's wedding. By then, Robin avers, it became evident that high Tory Englishness was no protection against US capitalism. Mention of Invisible Touch can't help but bring to mind Patrick Bateman in American Psycho. In perhaps the most hilarious scene in the movie, Bateman, US consumer capitalism personified, perfectly ventriloquizes the 80s revisionist take on Genesis' career. I've been a big Genesis fan ever since the release of their 1980 album Duke. Before that, I really didn't understand any of their work. Too artsy, too intellectual. It was on Duke where Phil Collins' presence became more apparent. I think Invisible Touch was the group's undisputed masterpiece. It's an epic meditation on intangibility. At the same time, it deepens and enriches the meaning of the preceding three albums. Listen to the brilliant ensemble playing of Banks, Collins, and Rutherford. You can practically hear every nuance of every instrument. The peak of professionalism. Take the lyrics to Land of Confusion. In this song, Phil Collins addresses the problems of abusive political authority. In Too Deep is the most moving pop song of the 1980s, about monogamy and commitment. The song is extremely uplifting. Their lyrics are as positive and affirmative as anything I've heard in rock. Phil Collins' solo career seems to be more commercial and therefore more satisfying in a narrow way, especially songs like In the Air Tonight and Against All Odds, but I also think Phil Collins works best within the confines of the group than as a solo artist, and I stress the word artist. This is Susudio, a great song, a personal favourite. But like Gabriel's Melt album, the one which includes Games Without Frontiers, etc., wasn't In the Air Tonight Collins' take on New Wave? Certainly, what fascinates about the early Genesis is the quaint old-world Englishness of their record covers. Take the Nursery Crime sleeve, see Above, of its sinister Lewis Carroll croquet lawn and suggestion of a fairy tale Albion, of pantomime gone bad, Punch and Judy menace. I'm not sure I've heard this one, to be honest, but the Gabriel era Genesis I have heard falls disappointingly short of the English can plus spirit of Eden plus Edward Lear plus medieval carnival perverse pastoral epic I idly imagined. Gabriel's vision and voice, then that quasi-hysterical Anglo-quaver, were the saving graces, but really the band are so poor, so lacking in imagination and deftness, that the end result is not the nobly deluded, elephantine absurdity one always associates with prog, but a plodding unworkmanlike competence. Like most prog I've heard, Genesis' problem is not self-indulgent excess, it's dullness. Listening to the two Gabriel Genesis tapes I have, borrowed long ago from my prog correspondent Bruce, what strikes me about their music is its lack of nuance. It is either quiet or loud. No middle ground, no eddying flow or ebbing undercurrent, just a stuttering study in jerky contrast. Isn't that jabbing masculine jerkiness, that anti-plateau jumpiness, which is so much of a turn-off about prog? Genesis' sound was English by default, still blues/R&R based. It was English only in the sense that it was a specifically English take on American forms, not in the sense that it evoked England. What I've heard of Gabriel's solo stuff is much more intriguingly English than Genesis. I've always found Salisbury Hill, for instance, movingly evocative of the rural English experience, the sharpness of clear air, that hollow, mossy feeling of earth beneath the feet, the town lights scattered below. In any case, if Gabriel-era Genesis were a failed attempt to produce a convincingly English rock sound, Collins-era Genesis and post-Sledgehammer Gabriel were an achieved attempt at simulating and indeed outdoing US AOR. Robin is right. By then there was not a trace of English public school resistance to American hegemony. They are part of the program. But what is it that Sledgehammer ends? I'll come back to that. October 14th, 2003. Hell's Answer to the History Channel, now with pictures. Mr. Craner's new one, Cita Violenta, as deliriously compelling as ever. Hell's Answer to the History Channel, CNN for the unconscious. October 15th, 2003. If it ain't gutter broken, couple of cracking posts from Nick Gutterbreaks on suicide and Hall & Oates. Sometimes really not understanding can be just the right idea. October 16th, 2003. United responds. Responses from Tim on Freaky Triggers Sport 1 Fred and Scott to my Capital United piece. I have to disagree with Tim about one thing though. I reckon England would cream Man U. That's partly what's so amusing about Kurt's position. His lofty assumptions about United status have more to do with their share price than their current achievements on the pitch. United are getting no closer to winning the Champions League. The idea that they would win the World Cup is ridiculous. Comments. Apart from 1999, which, let's face it, was exceptional in all senses, United in Europe are no better than Tim Henman at Wimbledon. They go into the competition every year with overreaching ambition, carrying unrealistic public expectations, and fail at the semi or quarter-final stage year in year out. That's no slow on United or Henman, who are both still the country's leading representatives of what they do. Just a simple observation, posted by Tim Rambler. Whilst it is impossible to really judge this, I think you have to compare England to Tim Henman as well. 1966 aside, curses there goes my argument. At every major competition, they flatter to deceive. I think it would be a close-run thing, with the club side's team advantage balanced out against Beckham's outstanding England performances, posted by Paul. I hate to contradict you there, Mark, but Manchester United, as much as I hate them, are a far better outfit than the England national side. England don't have a striker to match Van Nistelrooy, and anyone suggesting Owen will be taken outside and shot. Neither do they have a midfield with the directness and pace of Giggs. Little things like this make a huge difference. United have at least 2 more world-class footballers in their first team than England do. Also, back to your original post, I have to disagree about Ferguson. The man would love to see the English national side fuck up. And as would I. For some reason, I've been able to support the English team since I was about 12 years old when I realised that there were places in the world where football was an art rather than an industry. Posted by Philip. England don't have a striker to match Van Nistelrooy, and anyone suggesting Owen will be taken outside and shot. Shoot me then. Owen has scored at every level, against the lowliest Minnow and the highest quality opposition, under all kinds of pressure. Van Nistelrooy, let's see how he does in the World Cup, if Holland qualify and if he's selected. Neither do they have a midfield with the directness and pace of Giggs. Well, Gerrard is pretty direct, and so is Rooney, and like most wingers, Giggs can be embarrassingly ineffective. It was only last season that he was being booed at Old Trafford after all, and Rooney can hit a bundle from 10 paces, unlike Giggs. Also, back to your original post, I have to disagree about Ferguson. The man would love to see the English national side fuck up. I didn't mean to imply anything different. Ferguson has any number of reasons for hating England, it's true. What did I say that suggested something else? For some reason, I haven't been able to support the English team since I was about 12 years old when I realised that there were places in the world where football was an art rather than an industry. Supporting England is an affliction, not a rational choice. It's a delicious pain, a marrow-deep compulsion. That's the way it should be, otherwise one would be like the cliched Surrey-dwelling United fan Kurt was implicitly defending, dressing up his desire to support the most successful team in the guise of a principled transcendence of locality. Supporting England is like supporting United used to be, in that interregnum between Busby and Ferguson, the wilderness of hopeless hope, keening disappointment, and heroically idiotic optimism. Now supporting England and supporting United have polar opposite motivations. You support United if you expect to win. You support England if you can hardly imagine succeeding. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Oh, and Philip, it's great to see you're still reading. Pity you're not still writing as much. I know I'm not the only one to be missing. It's all in your mind. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Much as it pains me to write this, Mark, as a Man City fan, but United would at present beat England. I've little doubt about that. As for the only other point I'm particularly bothered to make, yeah, come back. It's all in your mind, please. Posted by Scott. Come on, Mark. Van Nistelrooy is already second top scorer in the all-time Champions League list after only 2 and a bit full seasons playing there. And this, let us not forget, is a tournament widely held to be more difficult to win than the World Cup. Gerrard and Rooney are both good players, but Giggs has one thing Gerrard definitely doesn't have, and what Rooney is only showing in flashes, the ability to run with the ball and beat more than one man. It's an indispensable gift, and United would have been nowhere near the club they are without his services over the past 6 or 7 seasons. As to Ferguson, I can't remember exactly what it was you said, and I'm too lazy to check. It was just something that contrasted his attitude to England with that of the board, as if he was a pure footballing man, and they were bean counters hell-bent on screwing England at any cost. Ah, yeah, I only have room for Southampton FC in my instinctive support locker. All my other footballing devotion goes to the game as it should be played. Posted by Philip. Oh, and the prog thing interests me, though my time is limited. I've been listening to Rundgren's A Wizard, a True Star a lot recently, which will definitely get my vote as the most prog thing ever committed to tape. Posted by Philip. As for Ferguson, I can't remember exactly what it was you said, and I'm too lazy to check. It was just something that contrasted his attitude to England with that of the board, as if he was a pure footballing man and they were being counted as hell-bent on screwing England at any cost. I certainly didn't mean to say that. I was contrasting Ferguson's attitude to the board in relation to this globally visioned brand thing rather than in relation to England. I imagine that pretty much convergent in there. attitude to England, actually. Posted by Mark K. Punk. 1. Thanks for the link, Mark. 2. Football as it should be played is a line of thinking which drives me mad. Football should be played effectively. And that blanket privileging of the fancy passing game is something which drives me crazy. An effectively played long ball game is very exciting. How do you feel about someone who wandered on here and started talking about one particular style as music as it should be played? Actually, there's a fellow on ILX who does that. He's called Gare, and he's unfailingly pleasant about his tunnel vision. I like his style. He thinks you can measure the quality of music by combining A, complexity, i.e. number of chord changes, and B, how melodic it is. It's not clear to me how this is measured, but I guess Gare knows. In this model, rhythm is tolerated as a kind of chases for A and B, but not encouraged, and rhythm-based music is not admitted at all. It's the same thing. 3. Most football supporting sees itself as a kind of holy pain, hence the talismanic importance of the trip to Carlisle/Plymouth/wherever, the mythic status of standing in the rain on an uncovered terrace we suffer in order to be admitted into the community. Those at the centre suffer most. 4. Player-for-player England are probably as good as Man U, but club football allows a depth of familiarity and tactics which it would be hard for a national team to get near. That's what I was trying to get at. Posted by Tim H. I have to disagree. There's a difference between me pissing about on a guitar and a Hendrix intro. There is a difference between me scuttling across the piano and Nina Simone playing. There's a difference between Zidane hitting a ball 50 yards and it landing on the intended player's toe, and an English player, Beckham aside, striking the ball that distance and vainly watching it skip out of play. The football purely for victory variant to describe obviously exists, why I am thrilled if Southampton win, even though they are a bunch of hod carriers. But there is another kind of spectating, where you watch purely to see something unexpected done, and that is what I am talking about. Seeing a player do something totally unique, even if insignificant in the context of the match, is a joy. I know there are people who can't appreciate a game in this way, for whom everything is to have utility, but thank the Lord I am not one of them. Posted by Philip. Player for player, United are ahead in my opinion by a Kian and a Giggs, and possibly, depending on how he develops, a Ronaldo. Posted by Philip. United are ahead in my opinion by a Keane. Nah, Keane's finished. On the long ball thing, I really love Tim's daring to say the unsayable and attack the pretty short passing game. Come on, we're all secretly bored by those oh-so-precise passing triangles, aren't we? Philip surely has a point, though. Aimless slumping the ball upfield is just as tedious, but at their best, English teams, and the England team itself, can combine the best of both, moving the ball upfield with speed and accuracy. Beckham isn't the only England player who can hit an accurate long ball. Gerrard is also a master of the raking pass, even if he wants to play the killer ball too often. Posted by Mark K. Punk. I think United would win, and yet it has something to do with familiarity with each other and something to do with having better players. Posted by Luke. I can accept the familiarity thing, but I'm not sure who the better players are these days. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Appreciation of craft has never been my thing. In music, art, or football, it's all very well citing Zidane or Beckham or a few gifted golden children, but there's a whole world of football in between. A better musical comparison for most football played the way it should be played is pub blues bars. I'd rather see simple songs delivered simply than someone demonstrating their blues chops. Refusing to see what's good about simplicity or that effect is sometimes more important than process. Prem fandom/TV fandom is great, but I find it dispiriting. This is seeing another tedious passing triangle dribbling out into touch and knowing that someone's justifying that with pseudo-moral football play the right way / the even more irksome I have certain beliefs about football. Experience says you're pretty much as likely to see something amazing after a decent ball into the mixer as you are after a well-worked set of triangular short passes. Mostly, I don't like people assuming moral high grounds when it comes to aesthetic preferences. Posted by... doesn't say there. Sorry, that last posting was me, you could probably have guessed. Posted by Tim H. Well, I was brought up on the Brian Clough passing game, and I've never really overcome my detestation of the Wimbledon/Jack Charlton Ireland loading the artillery approach. Those England-Ireland matches of that era, some of the worst to be played in international football ever. I do think that a British-style passing game, well executed, is more exciting than allegedly superior continental triangles, and don't even start me on Brazil. Posted by Mark K. Punk. October 16th, 2003, Stasis House. I hate the word Thursday now, because if I see it at the top of the pillbox, I know there have been no updates. Like Miss Havisham's stopped clock, that Thursday means time has frozen at the pillbox. Seeing that Thursday is like arriving at an old friend's house and finding entrance barred by a locked, wrought-iron gate. All we know is that they have gone, but where to, and will they ever return? Comments. I'm the same, though I don't feel good about myself for keep going back. They're like Greyfriars Bobby. Bloody rude, really, disappearing like that, especially as one of the great things about Pillbox was IP's heartfeltness, about love and good friends and decent behaviour towards one's fellows. for not even so much as a goodbye, or don't bother coming back here, unless the impenetrable Rilke poem was it. Posted by Peter. Hey, I'm not having a go at Ian, just registering sadness. I'll continue to loiter hopefully around the pillbox until told, finally and definitively, that there will be no more. Posted by Mark K. Punk. October 17, 2003. Borges for breakfast. Most of the action on K-Punk is being generated in the comments boxes at the moment, and naturally I enjoy that. It's funny how the most offhand remarks generate the most feedback. Witness the British Sea Power post, 12 comments, and the United Response post, 12 comments and counting. The United Response post presents me and anyone else who wants to play with diabolic temptation. Scurry down the rabbit hole of speculation about who would win, Man U or England, and you're in danger of never returning. I suppose it's partly the impossibility of these never-to-be-realised scenarios that draws us to worry on at them. I can imagine tutting censoriously, or Marcelo tutting censoriously about silly laddish obsessing, and half of me agrees, yet our capacity to indulge in these pointless derives in that divertissements, to invest trivia with weight and significance, is what is most charming about the male of the species. It's a genuine existential triumph, almost heroic. On either side of this pleasant, seemingly harmless leisure pursuit lurk two dangers, absurdity and atrocity. The first is personified by Alan Partridge, earnestly debating who would win in the fight between Sean Connery's Bond and Roger Moore's. The second by a fundamentalist dogmatism, a passional commitment to die and / or kill in the name of these phantom commitments. These how many angels can dance on the head of a pin conjectures. I suppose the appeal of Nick Hornby, though it's not an appeal I've ever succumbed to, is that he cheerily sets up camp between these two extremes, obsessive and fixated, but self-aware enough to avoid either bathos or fascism. I have more of a weakness for Danny Baker, whose breakfast shows on BBC Radio London, which my crappy little clock radio can pick up, are delightfully and genuinely anarchic, unscripted, unplanned, interrupted only by the station's de rigueur news and weather slots, which, like the nagging awareness in a dream that you will awake, are irritating emissaries from the real world which you must soon re-enter. The show is held together by the charismatic sorcery and joyful force of Baker's cracker barrel personality. Baker is the Borges of breakfast, a connoisseur and inventor of unlikely taxonomies. Famous doctors, celebrity teeth, the greatest ad slogans ever, fictional characters who wear three-quarter length trousers, the strange routines of other families, tiny details which suddenly reveal that other people's houses are really other worlds. Baker lures you into fixating on these categories that you couldn't even have dreamt of. His mind tirelessly pursues these non-topics which have nothing in common with each other apart from the fact that they are all objectively of no possible importance. The carnival king of a world turned upside down, Baker, thankfully, makes you forget what's really important. He is genuinely surrealist in a way that the actual surrealists, too po-faced and programmatic, seldom were, serious about the silly. It's the seriousness that Nietzsche recommended, the seriousness of the child at play. What you're suddenly aware of when you're cast out of Baker's Wonderland is the insufferable adult weight of the rest of the culture, with its neurotic faux sophistication and prurience. There's not a trace of irony, not a shred of meta-self-consciousness in Baker's curatorial craziness. This is radio as a situationist derive, wandering without premeditated purpose through London's unconscious. Only guiding thread through this funhouse London labyrinth is Baker's enthusiasm. Enthusiasm, enthusiasm. Enthusiasm is obsession gone liquid, its calcified one-eyed fixity transformed into a foaming, teeming froth. Exactly what you need in the morning. Comments. I like Danny Baker's program too. Today can crush the life out of me in a minute, so it's a small skid down the FM dial and things get better. Posted by Oliver. I didn't expect any support on this one, least of all from you. I imagined you with your ear pressed to the speaker, hoovering up all the latest news from Guyana and Kenya. The exact same thing you describe happened with me. I tried for a while to be sensible and adult and middle class and listen to those measured, unexcitable voices on Today. By accident, appropriately enough, I tuned into Baker, and I've never listened back. Baker has that quality of intimacy of all the best broadcasting, feels like your own private thing that few other people know about. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Well, my ex used to listen to the World Service in the morning, and that's a pretty fucking strange thing to wake up to. It sounds like it's being transmitted from the back of a jeep inside Afghanistan. Every story seems to be about political violence or oppression and involve a hysterical woman sobbing. She used to say, "It's good because you can hear stories that you wouldn't otherwise." And I'd say yes and go to work with nerves shot and the sound of tanks and mortar ringing in my ears. Now I don't listen to it because my radio doesn't do FM, which also means I usually miss the shipping forecast, which is a shame. October 17th, 2003. Dutch Can Do. Tim's comments below on the United Response post comparing football to music reminded me of something Simon wrote ages ago, where he made an analogy between Can and the total football of the Dutch team. What a fabulously suggestive parallel. I've never been able to think of Can and that classic Dutch side in quite the same way since. The elegant, almost telepathic interplay, the non-organic fluency and fluidity, The rhythm chaos of the group mind. You see, you don't know whether I'm talking about Can or the Dutch, do you? Comments. Hi, the Total Football vs. Can article sounds like interesting fun to read. Do you know whether it is available online somewhere? Greetings from the NL. Keep on blogging. Posted by Willem. It wasn't a whole article, as I recall, just a passing reference in a piece on Can. Thanks for the support.
October 18th, 2003. No Future Bleed, Neil's Hauntology, The Neil Tapes, BBC4. Thanks to Michael for the heads up. The most haunting moments in BBC4's retromentary on Nigel Neil were reconstructions of his lost television play The Road. Like many of Neil's fictions, The Road was a new twist on the ghost story. All ghost stories are about time travel. In the standard version, of course, they are about the past invading the present, or about the present being captured by the past. The Road cunningly reversed this. Set in 1771, it was about spectres of/from the future, reverberations from an event yet to occur. The sirens and panicked screams and car noises that disturbed the villages of the 18th century were the sounds of people fleeing that which can never be escaped. Their own destiny, planetary ground zero, year zero, total nuclear annihilation. The Road, like much of the BBC's output in those days, was not preserved. There's something awfully poignant about the thought of a ghost story about the future being lost to that very future, like one of the burned films in Auster's Book of Illusions. TV then, everything performed live, flared with the intensity of the modernist moment, intended to enrapt fixation by an audience not yet multi-channel splintered, hang on to every syllable of this self-erasing text. Because not yet lulled into indifference by the prospect of endless reruns, dramas were not repeated, then they were restaged, like theatre. No, now in postmodern time, the video cassette, that which is preserved in advance, that which can be watched at any time, and so is never watched, doesn't record television, it transforms it. Fatality, the lure of total quiescence, the human appetite for auto-destruction. Even before Ballard, Neil brought Freud to bear on SF. No, not the superego, ego, id, Spock, Kirk, Bones, triad of Star Trek's cuddly psychodrama. Neil's Freud was the dark magus of Beyond the Pleasure Principle, the pitiless explorer of the death drive's intensive hydraulics. It's in Beyond the Pleasure Principle that Freud reminds us that, in trauma, time breaks down. No time at all in the unconscious, with its terrible compulsions to repeat its circuitous journey back to where, and when, it had never left. What we most want is not to be, never to have been. What we most are is alien. Perhaps the most arresting pages in Marcus' Lipstick Traces are devoted to Hammer's version of Neil's Quatermass and the Pit. As you read Marcus retelling Neil's masterpiece, you wonder what all this has to do with what Lipstick Traces is supposed to be talking about, while us knowing, really, that nothing could be more relevant to punk than Neil's psychogeologic horror story. Neil's revelation that human beings are the byproduct of an alien breeding experiment, that deep within us is a Martian, burning with the desire to indiscriminately destroy others, yes, but ultimately itself, is the uncomfortable punk gnosis. Neil's presentiments can be sold as moral warnings, flag-waving for Eros against Thanatos, witness Bernard Quatermass' grim vision of Earth becoming the Martian's second dead planet, if we do not learn to rein in the Martian within us. Yet Neil has already deconstructed the opposition between Eros and Thanatos, human and Martian. Unravel the human, unravel Eros, and you discover that both are only folds within the body of anorganic Thanatos. Neil's SF, like Ballard's disaster novels of the early 60s, is compelled to endlessly rehearse apocalypse, to reimagine civilization and meltdown. Don't be fooled. The moral messages of what libido equals Thanatos needs in order to simultaneously mask and show itself. If you are continually repeating something, it's because you want it. Like the rest of us, Neil can't help but desiring London's devastation. The Quatermass serials of the 50s and 60s were too early for me. I've only seen the Hammer film versions. The 1979 return on ITV with John Mills as my Quatermass, its images of England in anomie, civil society disintegrating, New Age travellers following ley lines leading to their own annihilation, bomb culture, oh yes, are now mixed in my mind with those on the covers of the Dark Heart post-punk LPs. Quatermass brought the implied world of Killing Joke, Cabaret Voltaire and Tubeway Army, apocalypse, graffiti walls, bombed out buildings, barricaded streets, to unlife. Unfortunately, I fell asleep during what looked like the excellent Stone tapes. I don't suppose it's being repeated, is it, Michael? Comments. Yep, the BBC4 Sunday schedule is as follows. 21:00 Alchemists of Sound. Alchemists of Sound traces the rise and fall of the Radiophonic Workshop, an in-house department established in 1958 to provide extraordinary sounds and music for the BBC's TV and radio services. best known for its theme tunes to Blake 7, Blue Peter, Open University, and The Body in Question, and of course Doctor Who. This documentary reveals the complex techniques deployed by the workshop long before synthesizers were invented. The program is narrated by Oliver Postgate, the voice behind the children's TV hits Ivor the Engine, The Clangers, and Bagpuss 2200 Art Safari. This program contains scenes that some viewers may find disturbing, includes interview with Bjork, 2230, The Neil Tapes, Time Shift. Time Shift celebrates the career of pioneering TV writer Nigel Neal, whose Quatermass serials terrified audiences in the 1950s, whose later works include the legendary TV plays The Stone Tape and The Year of the Sex Olympics. In an in-depth interview, Neal talks about the challenges of bringing his vision to the screen, how his dramas both reflect the issues of their time and frequently anticipate the future. Time Shift also meets Neal's family, colleagues, and admirers like the League of Gentlemen, who talk about his lasting influence. 2310, The Stone Tape, Time Shift. The Stone Tape was first broadcast on Christmas Day 1972, and despite being one of the most praised dramas in the history of British television, it's only been repeated once before in 1973. Nigel Neal's astounding modern-day ghost story takes the old dark house genre and turns it on its head, as a team of scientists trying to devise a new recording medium buy up an old house to conduct their confidential research, only to find it seems to be haunted. Rather than find the manifestation alarming, they decide to throw all their energy and equipment into investigating the phenomenon. Neal's story explores groundbreaking theories of parapsychology while building suspense to unbearable levels as the malevolent atmosphere begins to take its toll on the characters, leading to a shocking climax. The Stone Tape stars the late Michael Bryant, one of the finest TV actors of his day, in a superbly brutal performance with strong support from Jane Asher, Ian Cuthbertson, and James Cosmo. Alchemists of Sound is repeated on Tuesday at 8:30 and 11 o'clock on Wednesday. Posted by Michael. Thanks, Michael. Anyone who didn't see it and can should. Posted by K-Punk. TV then, everything performed live. Not by 1963, when The Road was produced, everything wasn't. Videotape had been invented circa 1956 to 57, and even British TVA had discovered it by the 1960s. That said, there may well have still been some examples of live-to-air drama I'm not aware of, and The Road may have been one of them. I don't know, though by the sound of it, I'd have my doubts. And of course, the fact that the BBC may have recorded a given program prior to or on its transmission is no guarantee they still have the recording. As for the Stone Tape, only the scream-inducing cost prevents me from buying the British Film Institute DVD of it. BFI also have Neal's Year of the Sex Olympics, posted by James Russell. Fair play, James, but wasn't a great deal of TV drama still performed live in 1963? Weren't the early Doctor Who done like that, for instance? As you can see, I'm no TV historian. At any rate, and although I might have confused some details, the earlier 1984 certainly was performed live. There's no question that The Road didn't survive. The documentary made a point of stressing that the tapes are often wiped for reuse, posted by Mark K. Punk. Tapes often wiped for reuse. As a pretext for junking, that's historically debatable. VT simply wasn't a reusable resource in the way that's suggested today. Up until 1968, editing VT was literally a matter of cutting and splicing. Re-recording over spliced tape held the potential danger of dropout. And contrary to revised opinion, as compared with total production costs, the cost of a reel of 2-inch Ampex quad tape would have been small. The reasons for junking are quite different. One, as regards to the older practices of telerecording, preserving material by training a movie camera at a monitor. What got saved is very much at the whim of the head of telerecording, hence the patchy archive status of the Quatermass experiment. I've got standards, you know. The 1953 Cartier/Neal production of 1984 was telerecorded as much out of concern for the political furor it was creating as for subsequent re-showings. 2. The BBC didn't have the resources to store archive material. There simply wasn't room at Alexandra Palace. 3. There was an assumption, with the establishment of colour on the main channels, that people wouldn't want to watch repeats of popular shows recorded in black and white. 4. Actors typically signed contracts with clauses particular to them, making renegotiating contracts for the purposes of facilitating repeats prohibitively complex and expensive. 5. There was no proven market for archive television until the early to mid-80s. I should also imagine that, at least for a time, equity placed limits on the period a recording could be preserved for or the number of possible repeats. Posted by Michael. Okay, thanks, Michael. But they did save it in the documentary, didn't they? Posted by Mark K. Punk. The age of live broadcast drama certainly extended into the early 60s, of CF Z-Cars, Dixon of Dock Green, broadcast as part of a stream entitled First Night. I bet you were crisp order at the road. A crisp answer that The Road was performed live. Like early Doctor Who, it would have been committed to videotape, but as Neal's biographer Andy Murray states, it was subsequently wiped. Posted by Michael. Neil bemoans the introduction of 625 lines here. http://www.geocities.com/televisioncity/8504/neil.htm. Posted by Michael. Weren't the early Doctor Who done like that, for instance? Not quite. They were never actually broadcast live, but the early episodes were recorded almost live, i.e. in sequence and in one take with as few breaks as possible. I have a Doctor Who The Aztecs DVD, according to the production notes of which the last episode of that story was recorded in 45 minutes, i.e. with only 20 minutes for scenery shifting and all of that. Even the pre-filmed flight scene was recorded live onto the tape during the studio recording rather than edited in later. This procedure is the reason why the early Doctor Who stories are full of fluffed lines, usually from William Hartnell, cf. the first episode of The Web Planet, where he forgets for what must be nearly 30 seconds what he should be saying next. Because unless the error was absolutely catastrophic, there simply weren't any retakes. The Aztecs DVD has a nice interview with one of the supporting players who says that about the only way to get a retake for fluffing a line was by swearing very loudly and thus rendering the take unusable. As for reusing tapes, I don't know the precise extent to which wiping and reusing old tapes really went on, but I don't think the BBC were that afraid of tape dropouts. The surviving film prints of the black and white Doctor Who episodes seems to bear that out. There's loads of instances of master tape dropout, lock-off and tracking errors, etc. recorded in those prints. By James Russell. Compare and contrast. US 50s SF movies are routinely linked to the Cold War, invasions either by brute force or stealth, betrayal, body possession, or replacement by hostiles. Neil's material overlaps with this, most notably in Quatermass 2. The thing with Quatermass 2 is that the whole political establishment has been compromised. It's got lots in common with 70s paranoia flicks like Parallax. Quatermass and the Pit is something else entirely. Definitely has big doses of Freud, especially the anthropological aspects of Freud's work. The alien invasion is what constitutes humanity. The scenes of devastated London at the end of Quatermass in the Pit would have reminded many viewers of the Blitz or the wreckage of post-war Europe, more carnage created by humans. Posted by Daniel. James, you've explained it all. It was because of all the mistakes that I had assumed, based partly on hazy memories of documentaries, for the early episodes were filmed live. Daniel, yes, Moses and monotheism is especially important. Quatermass in the Pit couldn't be less Cold War paranoiac, could it? No point fearing an imminent alien takeover if you are alien and always have been. Posted by Mark K. Bunk. As for reusing tapes, I don't know the precise extent to which wiping and reusing old tapes really went on, but I don't think the BBC were that afraid of tape dropouts. The surviving film prints of the black and white Doctor Who episodes seem to bear that out. There's loads of instances of master tape dropout, lock-off and tracking errors, etc. recorded in those prints. Dropout was intrinsic to the media of the day. Quad tape was, as used in the 60s, would have been lucky to survive 100 head passes, oxide shedding an inevitable consequence of the 1000 psi pressure exerted by the heads, and sync errors would have inevitably arisen from the physical editing of VT, since it wouldn't have been especially easy to distinguish between fields. Posted by Michael. If you missed the Stone tape, it is available on DVD from the BFI. They also do the Year of the Sex Olympics. Both are excellent. Regards, Steve. Posted by Steve Andrews. October 18th, 2003, backed by popular demand. With possibly the best post ever and one of the best blogs around, it's All in Your Mind's Philip, whom I thought might have been taken to squatting in K-Punk's comment boxes. He's more than welcome, of course, but it's great to see him back on his own home turf. October 18th, 2003, All Animals Have Personalities. Hey, this blogging lark can have its perks. Arrived home from work yesterday to find 2 CDs on my doormat. Goblin Suspiria from Jim and Transports by Tarzites from Matt, both outstanding. The Tarzites LP is a Lynch-esque dream record, a delirial wash of backwoods speech, Muslim prayer, wail, church bells, drones, primitive drum machines, and proto-synth. You're reminded fleetingly of Stockhausen's Hymnen, Newbarton, early Cabaret Voltaire, Mark Stewart circa As the Veneer, even Funkadelic's Maggot Brain. Transports ought to be fragmentary and dissipated, a haphazard juxtafest of incongruous elements, but it's just the opposite. It has a compelling consistently, lacking in the desiccated academic noodling of so much of today's wire-type experimentalism. You want to keep listening, and when it finishes, you press play again. Transports is at the darker pole of uneasy listening, queasy listening, which is genuinely ambient in that it brings into play the sounds of the listening environment. It's like a dream in that transient sounds become incorporated into the experience. Matt thought I'd like it, and I do. In its mood, the Goblin record is not so far from Transports. It's everything one hoped prog could be, but, in my limited exposure to it, seldom is. Goblin have what most prog I've heard doesn't: a depth plumbing bottom end, a bass that coils and rears like a giant cobra. Incidentally, what much prog has in common with regressive rock is a disdain for or indifference towards rhythm. Suspiria isn't some steroid-bloated inflation of rock, a prolongation of rock by other means. The instrumentation and the mixing don't reflect rock's trad priorities. Yes, there are guitars, but not as lead instruments. In fact, there aren't really lead instruments of any kind here. Woozy kettle drums, rasping semi-audible whispers, trance-inducing percussion, multi-tracked chants, swooping moogs. The first side is a masterpiece of sustained fret, mastering all the tension that prog typically throws away in its ostentatious determination to showcase virtuosity. Thanks, chaps. Comments. This Suspiria record, right? This is the actual soundtrack to the Dario Argento film Suspiria, isn't it? And didn't Dario Argento have a prog group called Goblin, who made soundtracks for films, most of which are made by Dario Argento? I love that film. Like Dawn, Nylon and Scary Masks, and one of the great things about is the music, posted by Oliver. Yes, that's right, Oliver. Cringes in shame. I haven't seen the film, I'm embarrassed to say, posted by Mark K. Punk. The Anchor Bay DVD of the film is quite good. Among other things, there's an exceptionally cheesy music video of Daemonia, the new band featuring Goblin keyboardist Claudio Simonetti performing the theme music. Goblin soundtrack worked for quite a few non-Argento projects, for the one I'd be most interested in hearing is the score they did for the Italian issue of George Romero's Dawn of the Dead, which Argento produced, posted by James Russell. Movie Groove has loads of Goblin stuff. http://www.moviegrooves.com/shop/goblin/htm. Not generally as good a while as Suspiria, but Profondo Rosso is a particular favourite, posted by Ben Squires. Solamente Nero is worth checking out too. The music was written by Stevio Cipriani but performed by Goblin. It's half oscillating Transylvania synths and half songs, most of them under 2 mins, most of which are basically revisits to the same horror disco themes that get more fried and dubbed out each time, posted by JD. October 18th, 2003. At this point I propose to leave the dark and dismal subject of the traumatic neurosis and pass on to examine the method of working employed by the mental apparatus in one of its earliest normal activities, I mean in children's play, beyond the pleasure principle. I know this because yesterday in a gift shop, one side of the child's doll there was actually a Sigmund Freud action figure. There is not much left. I've got one of those. Got it for my birthday. Thanks, Rob. I want a Jung figure for it to beat up. October 18th, 2003. Time to shatter some myths. Could things get any more crass? Ages ago, in internet time, in real time about 3 months, I was moaning about TV and film's tendency to lazily appropriate pop as a period signifier. Tonight I accidentally stumbled across BBC Two's Big Read, yet another one of those TV charts, this time of the British public's favourite books, which exemplified a related syndrome. Here songs were yoked to books whose theme or title they shared. Needless to say, the BBC left no stone turned. Nothing was included unless it was completely, totally obvious. For example, The Great Gatsby, Bowie's Young Americans, Great Expectations, Billy Joel, Uptown Girl, 1984, Oakenfold's Big Brother theme, Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Guess What, Arthur Brown, Fire. See what I mean? It was so Chris Morris, it's untrue. But just as you're looking forward to hearing Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights, guess what they play? Marilyn Manson's The Beautiful People. The cross-linking of book to song produced a mutual delibidinization in just about every case. Each song was structurally put in the position of bathetically deflating the book, familiarizing it through E-Z, unthreatening reference. Stop it. Comments. I'm almost scared to ask, but what did they use for Lord of the Rings? Posted by Angus. I can't remember. What would you suggest? Posted by Mark K. Punk. For relevance, Ramble On by Led Zepp for cheap shots. Stop me if you think you've heard this one before, by The Smiths. Posted by Philip. Yes, I like Philip's second suggestion. Posted by Angus. October 19th, 2003. This spam is getting out of hand. Dear, I recently visited your website kpunk.blogspot.com/ and I like it very much. I would very much appreciate a link from your website to one of my projects, an adult DVD/video shop. To make this attractive for you, I can offer 2 links from 2 different websites, one non-erotic and one erotic site. Both of these websites have a lot of visitors and good rankings in the search engines. Please let me know if you're interested so we can work out the details. Sincerely, Laura. Comments. Spam, luncheon meat, sausages, porn, only connect. Posted by Philip. I like the phrase non-erotic site. I'll have to remember to specify this in future. I run a not-erotic website. Posted by Angus. Who's Laura? Posted by Oliver. Has she got her confused with Case Bunk? Posted by George. Who knows who Laura is? My bet is a is a bot of some kind. My bet is a bot. How's that for alliteration? I wonder if any other bloggers have had a similar message, or is there really something about K-Punk that made her think, aha, this site attracted loads of people gagging for porn? I love her claim that she recently visited K-Punk and enjoyed it. How recently? Not in the last month, obviously, during which time the blogger site has been abandoned in favour of this one. Posted by Mark K-Punk. I think Laura sounds like my type of girl. Posted by Oliver. I can arrange an introduction if you like, Oliver. I'm sure she'd appreciate a link from Sita Violenta. Posted by Mark K-Punk. Time, October 21st, 2003. Time for a change. I've promised to reply to Simon's 60s thing for a while, so here goes. No doubt the 60s itself was a fabulously variegated decade, full of surprise, wonder, and novelty. This doesn't seem to me to be the issue. The question is whether it should be allowed to maintain its status as a temporal anchor, the mythical point to which all subsequent cultural developments must be traced back. I just don't find this narrative useful, illuminating, or productive, even if, in some sense, it is true. For me, partly for perversity's sake, partly because it generates new perspectives. I prefer to see the 60s not as a golden age, but as a precursor to the 70s and 80s. No doubt this is a matter of aesthetic preference. I just find, for example, for your pleasure and unknown pleasures, is there a theme here? Maybe Newman's pleasure principle is the third in this triptych, superior to anything from the 60s. The 14-year-old in me, with his video and electronics saturated disdain for the cobwebby monochrome old newsreel 60s, is still something I can't get past. I now grant that 60s music is of historical interest, but it'll never affect me in the same way that 70s and 80s stuff does. As I said in the early days of K-Punk, it's as if Delia Derbyshire had rendered the whole of the 60s out of date in advance. Simon's other point, that early 70s prog can be placed within the 60s, since the 60s, as a cultural epoch, lasted until at least 73, is well made, but couldn't we also make a case for a micro-period lasting from 69 to 75? 69, even the digits of the year, so much more darkly exciting than anything else in the 60s. Simon's positing of glam as the great break seems to me much more fecund and kindling than the 60s flame. I find the idea of glam as a rejection of the 60s far more compelling than seeing it as its continuation. Naturally, rejection implies some dialectical relation to the previous decade / episteme / structure of feeling / whatever, but that doesn't mean that glam could be reduced to an antagonism for the 60s. Roxy, for example, strike me as absolutely irreducibly 70s, even if they unavoidably have some biographical connection to the 60s. Incidentally, since on Delia and all that, one of the many fascinating things to emerge from BBC 4's documentary on the BBC Radiophonic Workshop was the idea that its terminal decline was precipitated by the arrival of the synthesizer. The Moog made the workshop's bespoke sound construction, sounds generated from found sources, tapes painstakingly spliced and looped, seem redundant. At the same time, the Moog was unreliable and functionally limited, provoking sniffy disdain from the RW Radio Workshop. Nevertheless, it was unavoidable and apparently produced despair in the members of the workshop. Fascinating to be reminded how familiar sounds can be rendered electro-alien simply by pitch shifting, achieved by the workshops running at the tape at different speeds. And nice to hear the origin of John Craven's News Round jingle. No doubt James and Michael will correct me if I've made factual errors about the Radiosonic Workshop. RSW, absolutely no sarcasm intended, I hasten to add. I've learned tons from their contribution to the comments boxes. Another thing, hearing the Compact Suspiria album, it's all over in about 37 minutes, made me think that it's not the prog era, but now in which excess and indulgence comes as standard. Oh, for a 37-minute album now. Comments. I read a comment that Pierre Henry that said, blame the Moog for the downfall of electronic music too. It's more of that stuff about the quality of music going down since anyone can make tracks, etc. Some of the later stuff by the Radiophonic Workshop is as good as the early stuff. It's just a bit of change in it. Posted by Marcus.
October 21st, 2003. Loafishness. Shorn of one of my favourite lines of recent times. I love life, I just don't like my own. Crumbling Loaf really should be a sitcom, one of those typical British inertia coms, the blocked engine of which is the fact that the lead character has just enough vision to be discontented with his lot, but not enough drive to achieve escape velocity, and the gender designation is no accident here. It's always a he, isn't he? Whether it be Tony Hancock, Steptoe, Shelley, the sad revelation kept just out of their conscious awareness but constantly informing it is that their life, that fetid swamp of stasis, is the way it is because, in some sense, they want it like that. It's their desire that calls the tune, that returns them to a square one they profess to loathe. The name Crumbling Loaf is packed with the pathos and bathos as Sean has combined into his signature mode. It's loaded of semantic freight. Loaf meaning both brain, in the colloquial, use your loaf, and lethargic, to loaf around. The crumbling loaf is in the bread bin, sandpaper dry and flecked with mould, as a metonymic symbol of the single life. It's always impossible to eat fresh bread before it goes off when you live on your own. Crumbling evokes the gradual, barely perceptible, but nonetheless unavoidable sense of decline and disintegration that afflicts us 30-something males every time we cower away from the mirror. The crumbling loaf generation is the new version of Slacker. October 21st, 2003. It should be in your mind. It just gets better and better. It does. Philip continues his astonishing run of form. October 22nd, 2003. Canine Bling. I like the thought of this. October 22nd, 2003. On Conspiracy. A pre-response to this from CCRU. To attempt to refute such narratives is to be drawn into a tedious double game. One either has to embrace an arbitrary and outrageous cosmic plot in which everything is being run by the Jews, Masons, Illuminati, CIA, Microsoft, Satan, CCRU, or alternatively advocate submission to the most mundane construction of quotidian reality, dismissing the hyperstitional chaos that operates beyond the screens, cosmological dark matter and dark energy, virtual, imperceptible, unknown. This is why atheism is usually so boring. Both conspiracy and common sense, for normal reality script, depend on the dialectical side of the double game, on reflective twins, belief and disbelief, because disbelief is merely the negative complement of belief, cancellation of the provocation, disintensification, neutralization of stimulus, providing a metabolic yawn break in the double game. Comments. CF Terrorism/Reformism. Posted by Peter M. October 26, 2003. What do you think of this, Ray? Comments. Ha ha ha. Posted by Geeta. Yes. Posted by JD. October 28, 2003. Give me a sign. Hyperdub Steve tells me that a lengthy interview with none other than Wiley is forthcoming on Hyperdub. The man will be discussing his love of winter and will broach the question of those Oriental influences. Can't wait. I saw Steve at Middlesex University's Capitalism and Philosophy Lab, organised by the estimable Ray Brassier. I burbled briefly about Baudrillard's for a critique of the political economy of the sign, and tried to initiate some discussion on the question of MP3s and sign value. You might remember this being raised here, or at the old site, if you are being pernickety. Baudrillard's point is that many traditional analyses of capitalism have left what he calls sign value out of account. Marx's analysis, for instance, was based solely on the difference between exchange value, how much a thing costs, and use value, what it does. According to Baudrillard, more important than both of these gauges are sign value, the prestige attached to a particular object. It is an exchange value, still less use value, that determines sign value, just the opposite in fact. Things acquire monetary value on the basis of their prestige, not the other way around. The MP3 has a limited exchange value. As we all know, there are sites where you can pay for MP3s, but these are flying in the face of the general trend toward gratuity. My question was, does it have any sign value? Baudrillard argues that the level of sign value ascribed to an object has no relation to the intrinsic qualities of that object. Rather, sign value is determined by the object's differential relations to other objects. Baudrillard's example is fashion. If a miniskirt is deemed beautiful, it is not because of any of its own qualities, but simply because of its difference from the maxi skirt. So does the MP3 have sign value? My conjecture was that, lacking the allegedly supplementary features of the record or the CD, the cover, even the materiality of the disc itself, reduced to pure functionality, the MP3 lacks those elements in which sign value could be invested. Steve pointed out that the MP3 is an audio object and that there is no reason to assume that only visual objects have sign value. Others pointed out that an MP3 collection as a whole could have prestige. In certain online file-sharing communities, of course, if your collection reaches a certain size, you garner extra privileges, a form of online exchange value. The relation between sign value and the visual is an interesting one. A record collection can be displayed, and the display itself has an aesthetic quality. Yes, in a certain sense, an MP3 collection could be displayed, but such a collection has a non-aestheticizable, brute functionality. With music, as Steve said, prestige is acquired not solely, even primarily, by being seen to possess something, but by being seen to have heard it, the journalist or the blogger, and being heard to have heard it, the DJ. All that said, I still think that there is something different about the MP3. This isn't only about its lack of visual presence, there is also the issue of its lack of tactility, nothing to touch or hold. Speaking of Give Me a Sign, pop latest, Britney/Madonna. I'm with Spiz on this one. It's Madonna who lets down a really rather surfaceable single. The video has reached such a velocity of quick-cutting delirium that it is almost nightmarish. Witness that wood-slatted corridor straight out of Wells' The Trial, the scene with Titorelli the painter. I want this to be a hit. Britney has attained a tragic, pathetic grandeur over the past year or so, which reached its apogee with the painful humiliation of her appearance at the MVAs. Give her a break. The new Kylie is rather good too. Be much better if she wasn't singing on it, though. Comments. Very interesting. Some actually recommended that AODiobook to me the other day, and I forgot the title. Big up for the refresher. On the value of MP3, there are a couple of ways to look at, I think. It's pretty damn hard to place a metric value on an intensive object like a song or piece of art. I'd argue that they tend to have two main states, one where they have no monetary value at all, and one where they are infinitely valuable. Now, in reality, infinite has a threshold determined by each individual's financial state and philosophy. There are certainly times when given $1 million, I'd pay it all to hear that song that's in my head. Other times, that song might not be worth a dime to me. A recording really sells you the potential to hear what you want when you want it. It's worth nothing except in that it might provide you with infinite value at some point, hence the ability for price to fall close to zero, both in the used CD market and online. It also explains why the economies around musical experience, concerts, clubs, and jukeboxes are completely unaffected by the fact that the objects are now free. There is also an interesting connection to time and value here. In some of the less publicized corners of the file-sharing world, the users are actually paying for certain privileges. In one space, people pay about $12 a month for a service that provides 150k a second downloads of no queuing. Interestingly, this space has significantly less selection than most file sharing spots. In another space, people pay $5 a month in order to get priority access to downloads. They get placed ahead of non-payers in the queue. In this space, the value is on obscure and high-quality files. In both circumstances, the value is not in the files themselves, but in the speedy delivery of music. And that's what gets sold. The fact that that song will be there in the moment, it might be priceless. Posted by Abe. When's the Wiley thing coming? Posted by Luke. When's the Wiley thing coming? Soon is all I know. I'll let you know as soon as I hear it's up. Posted by Mark K. Punk. It's now up at http://www.hyperdub.com/software/wiley.cfm. Posted by Steve. Is there some sort of melancholy virus going around? Get it together, lads. Posted by Sean. October 28th, 2003. Wobot. Matt Slinky New Home. Wobot. November 6, 2003. TPS cover sheets. It's really got that bad. No entries for so long that the page is literally blank. Well, I've been denying myself blog time in a bid to stay ahead of work, an increasingly impossible Sisyphean labour. The more work I do, the more I seem to need to do. I was determined to be really organised this college year and not fall into my usual habit of chaos mismanagement, but it's congenital. I just can't stay sorted out. I hate administration. That's partly because I'm incapable of doing it, suffering from a stupefyingly disabling level of absent-mindedness. I tried to write a brief note to a colleague today and I had to make 5 attempts to do it. Just a few lines. Handwriting anything is near impossible for me now. I think I might have attention deficit disorder. Work. It's never going to go away. Everyone has to do it. I know. Doesn't make it any better, does it? I haven't got much else to talk about at the moment, but I wanted to break radio silence, in part because of kind inquiries from Mr. Ingram and Mr. Reynolds. Comments. Glad you are still about. Good news. Thought you'd done a runner like I. Penman. Phew. Bal. Posted by Bal. No, I wouldn't do a run, although I might end up not being able to post for one reason or another. Massive thanks, Bal. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Me too. Thought it was all over. Phew. Posted by Jed. On form as ever, though, good sir. Posted by Scott. Yeah, you're back. Posted by Pete. Yes, I was just about to send off a kind inquiry myself, Mark. Glad to see you're okay, and my sympathies rework trauma. Posted by Angus. Autumn brings lesson plans and worksheets and marking. My sympathies. Posted by Tim. Yeah, I was about to remind that usual procedure is threatening to give it up and deleting all the archives. You're not supposed to actually do it. Posted by Luke. Delete the archives. Now that's a thought. Perhaps go through it all and save only the essence. In my case, I think it'd be about a paragraph. Posted by Sean. November 6, 2003. Ground Zero. Well, it's really fantastic to be able to hear Wiley's Ground Zero, courtesy of Matt. I've had the two versions on constant play since I downloaded them. The drumless version is especially evocative, a kind of oral tableau with slow dissolve between black and white stills of the exposed, charred skeletons of the Twin Towers. Fascinating the way the drum programming on the other version oscillates between two-step, offbeat, slinky, junglistic, scurry, and ominous hip-hop menace. What is it that the mournful synth line reminds me of? There's a suggestion, bizarrely enough, of the electro waltzes of the Stranglers' Men in Black. Haven't thought about the Stranglers since Goldie mentioned them back in the day. Yes, that's close, but I'm sure there's something else. In any case, Wiley, like sometimes collaborator Jammer, thanks to Simon for sending me the Jammer Mix CD from Deuce, by the way, seems to fit right into K-Punk's Heart of Darkness, or Heart of Ice. The abstract neo-electro of Ground Zero is not so much Orientalist Darkcore Bliss as Orientalist Darkcore Dread. Actually, all of this links to the other big event of this week for me, seeing Fred's repeated on BBC4. 30-something readers will remember being traumatized by this in the early 80s. The teleplay begins as a simulated documentary about the impact of a nuclear strike on Sheffield, but ends up as a coolly Bergman-esque vision of a literal hell on Earth. The early post-blast scenes, with survivors huddling into barricaded-in basements, fearful of and hostile to outsiders, are reminiscent of nothing so much as Romero's Night of the Living Dead, near total anomie, society stripped back to its Hobbesian bare minimum. What Fred's brought to unlife was the virtual apocalypse haunting the Cape unconscious. As Neil's The Road shows, the bomb haunts the unconscious, not as a spectre from the past, but as a virtual future so terrible its shockwaves echo back through time. Ballard says that there are times, particularly times of great trauma, when the unconscious and the external landscape are flat with one another. This is what nuclear devastation would be like. The raw material of total nightmare, worse than the worst nightmare imaginable, now real. Reality at its most nightmarish, even though it is reality in its purest form. No escape, no return. The traumatized population literally cannot live with this, so they don't, auto-numbing themselves into the simulated death of blank-eyed shock. So many electrifying images, worthy of the most intense film. An almost one-eric sense in which, amidst swirling radioactive dust, a woman, her eyes coal-mine black and totally devoid of affect, clings onto the shrouded corpse of a baby. The eyes, vaguely questioning but dazed. If this can't be happening, this is happening, the trauma victim's mantra. Soldiers frisking the dead body of freshly shot looter for a packet of crisps. Salt and vinegar, it would be. I hate those. Woman giving birth in a filthy abandoned hangar, for only a chained-up barking dog for company. Hospitals like charnel houses, like that. Bacanoid facility in Jacob's Ladder. A decade later, England is a medieval country again, the massively reduced population hoeing an unyielding earth. Language attenuated, devolved into rough, guttural injunctions, reflecting a new harshness in social relations. No compassion, which is yet another luxury from a bygone age no one can even remember anymore. Comments. Read Day of the Triffids for the first time recently. Remember the TV series terrifying me when very young? This universal annihilation paranoia seems so remote now, I'm not sure I can access it in any meaningful way. Fear of terrorism just isn't the same, hey? The people running the war on terror are trying to help us recall some nuclear anxiety, threat to our way of life, etc., but it won't work. There were a couple of post-9/11 BBC miniseries about bioterrorism, I think, but nothing of the cultural resonance of Triffids or Freds or whatever. Posted by Pete. It's one of the best films ever made. I've been meaning to write about it for ages, but I don't need to now. I'm working on the Cold War at the moment, though. There was this thing about Ronald Reagan in 1983 after his administration poured all this money into defense, intensified the arms race, and led the world to the brink of nuclear war for the first time since the 60s. Well, the mid-70s, but that's a different thing. Kissinger playing power politics of DEFCON 3 while Nixon was losing control of his faculties. The penny finally dropped for a number of reasons, but one reason was this. A film called The Day After, which was like the American version of Fred's, but written from a schmaltzy Walton's perspective. Children crying, "I love you, Mum," as the mushroom cloud rises, that sort of thing. It terrified Reagan and most of America and pretty much altered the whole tone of his Cold War administration thereafter, hence the START treaties, Star Wars, and everything. Anyway, there'll be lots about this cheerful subject at Cita Violenta soon. Posted by Oliver. The moment in Fred's that stays with me is in the pub before the strike. Everyone is drinking, there's a news report, no one seems to pay much attention. Something extraordinary is happening in the corner of the room, and nobody notices. Posted by Nick K. From your words, Mark, I travelled to the place of dead roads and found this. In that modest span, gentlemen, we have come from stone axes and spears to intercontinental missiles of nuclear warheads. The same principle as the spear, but rather more efficacious. Laughter. Is it not feasible that other cultures may have travelled the same road and disappeared without a trace? The one other thing to bear in mind that Burroughs may have had multiple meanings in place behind the idea of that disappearance. Hosted by Al. Probably the most important film ever made, I thought, as I watched it from behind the sofa, and the most potent spur to activism. I certainly don't want this to happen. I will do anything to make this not happen. Posted by Sean. November 7th, 2003. Mrs. B. Toast and water. How does that even work? Comments. Come on, Mark. Let's get it together. November 7th. Posted by JG. November 12th, 2003. Recording Ghosts. I finally got around to watching my tape, of Nigel Neal's The Stone tape. What an amazing piece of work. Neal is cybergothic up to his eyeballs. His standard move is also to offer a scientific remotivation of the supernatural. I say remotivation because this is not a reduction of the supernatural to the scientific. What became slightly irksome about Doctor Who in the Pertwee phase, when it continually borrowed this move from Neal, was the Doctor's airy waving away of the supernatural in the name of science. Neal's method is more subtle. It's true, Neal agrees, as science since the Enlightenment has maintained there is no supplementary spiritual substance, but the material world in which we live is more profoundly alien and strange than we have ever imagined. Better to talk of the hypernatural than the supernatural in Neal's case. Rather than insisting upon the preeminence of the rational, and therefore also of the human subject alleged to be the privileged bearer of reason, Neal shows that an inquiry into the nature of what the world is like is also inevitably an unravelling of what we are. In the Stone tape, a group of scientists take up residence in a new research facility. It quickly becomes apparent that the building is haunted. One of their number, a female computer programmer, is particularly sensitive to the ghost, a servant girl from the 19th century who died in a mysterious fall. Inevitably, the scientists go from skeptical dismissal to a manic need to explain and map the phenomenon without much of a pause for breath. What is particularly interesting about the Stone tape, from the point of view of our particular corner of the blog moss, is that it is about a new recording medium. Neal's thesis is that hauntings and ghosts are particularly intense phenomena that are literally recorded by matter, by the stone of the room, hence the Stone tape of the title. What the scientists had been looking for, apparently coincidentally, was a new, more compact and durable recording medium. The Stone tape was incredibly prescient about the shortcomings of magnetic tape. But what the haunting phenomenon offers is the possibility not only of a new recording medium, but of a new player, the human nervous system itself. In their moment of exultant bliss, before the inevitably bleak denouement, the scientists laugh and joke about the prospect of a totally wireless communication system, transmissions beamed directly into your head, like Gibson's cyberspace, but without even the trodes. Can miniaturization pass through another threshold such that this becomes possible, or is it a question not of miniaturization at all, but of tuning the stimuli? In the end, of course, it all goes badly wrong. The scientist's obsessive activity had swiped the tape, or at least wiped away the thing last recorded onto it. Something else, something more ancient, stirs beneath, terrifying the female computer programmer into literally falling into the footsteps of the 19th century girl, plunging to her death in a state of total terror. So what Neal raises in the end is the breakdown of the distinction between the player and what is being played. To begin with, it seems that the ghostly screams are passive and inert, as incapable of exerting agency as the dry rot that afflicts the haunted room. Yet in the end, it is the human beings who are revealed to be caught in a terrible compulsion to repeat. It is as if the room, the site, it is eventually implied, of some unimaginably ancient place of sacrifice, solicits the scientist into precipitating yet another death, into playing out the same old sequence once again. The human players are themselves part of an aeons-old pattern of senseless repetition. All recordings are ghosts, but are really more substantial than they. November 18th, 2003. Two heads are better than one. A frightening world is an interesting one to live in. Magazine. The head of Strategic Air Command, General Tommy Powers, is famous for laughing off the effects of nuclear radiation on genetic mutations with the quip, "Nobody has yet proved to me two heads aren't better than one." And then you start to think about drugs in the bomb, and you remember back to all those 50s movies where all these kids are doing nuclear drills. The air raid siren goes, and all these kids get down on their hands and knees, and they hold their arms over their heads. You think, what's going on here? And it's obvious. They're worshipping the bomb. They're like atomic Muslims. The mushroom has become this Mecca, and they're pointing towards the east. The bomb is mutation. The kids are going, mutate me, melt me, meld me. The plan that he inherited was, Mr. President, you just tell us to go to nuclear war and we'll do the rest. And the plan called for devastating, indiscriminately, China, Russia, Eastern Europe, it was an orgiastic Wagnerian plan. Really fascinating piece, beautifully researched and written by Oliver at Città Violenta on the Cold War. The Cold War, and particularly those moments in the early 60s when it nearly went thermonuclear hot, has always exercised a grim fascination for me. Certainly impossible to imagine the K-punk canon, Joy Division, Fox, Magazine, Cabaret Voltaire, Grace Jones, without its influence, although influence is too weak a word for the deep-level psychic consistence of the Cold War in that generation. Deaf disco was it. This was the music that repudiated pleasure and identified with the non-organic and the fatal. Their implied worlds are either teetering on the edge of annihilation, Joy Division's Exercise 1, or it actually imagined the unthinkable. Check the way the guitar feedback on the intro to Exercise 1 resembles pterodactyl. SP screeches, almost as if it were anticipating the Stone Age to which we were about to be bombed back. Nothing exposes the redundancy of privatized psychoanalysis, the view that the unconscious can be understood in opposition to the social, from the recurring nightmares of total annihilation we all routinely had back then. But another Freud, the Freud of Beyond the Pleasure Principle and Civilization and its Discontents, seems to speak as the prophet of the Cold War. What we have come to terms with, this Freud says, is that as a species we desire destruction and death. In this sense, we are profoundly and deeply irrational, yet in that familiar paradox Freud makes his own, our drives have their own ineluctable logics and rationales. Freud's perspicacity here can easily be apprehended when we consider the cold eagerness with which Kennedy's military advisors were contemplating their orgiastic Wagnerian plans for massive preemptive nuclear strikes. On one level, their preferred option was purely rational, a detached calculation based on probabilities and outcomes. On another level, but at the same time, it has to be seen as a rationale, the finding of reasons for a pre-existing drive towards total destruction. What can account for this enthusiasm except a terrible libido, a monstrous desire? And that's the fascination of the Kata-punk music. It isn't protesting against nuclear war. Its desires cannot be socialized or humanized. It is, in fact, the most socially unacceptable desire possible. The libido of impersonal death. Death drive pop. Annihilism. Comments. Didn't Jung have something to say about that? Everyone thinking the same thing experience? And yes, who was it that sang All I Preach Is Destruction, posted by Baal? The new fated Kennedy blog reckons that his run-ins with the Thanatoids in the Navy brass in World War II was enough to convince him to never trust the State Department. And upon leaving a pro-first strike briefing in 1962 was heard to exclaim, "That's the human race?" Posted by Peter M. That link is not working for me, posted by Peter M. The Cold War isn't the only time that widespread dreams of annihilation have hit the human race. Apocalyptic visions were a regular fixture of the Middle Ages and embedded in much of the material culture of the time. In this view, the Cold War is a return to business as usual after the optimism of the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution, ironic as nuclear weapons are a direct product of both rationalist nuclear physics and the kinds of organizational and manufacturing processes only available in an industrial society. Posted by Daniel. The death drive permeates pop all the way through, e.g. the leader of the pack. It's the kind of death craved that changes from genre to genre. With the early industrialists, they wanted a death that matched their aesthetic, impersonal and mass-produced, making nuclear war an ideal candidate. Arguably, death drives all human endeavour, so this shouldn't come as a surprise. Posted by Daniel. Peter, that new Kennedy blog was one of the starting points of my research into this. There are copious quotes from it in my piece, including the one you mentioned. Considering that it's possible to reckon all American imperial power as essentially the same, they're all as bad as each other, it was striking to me reading the book the chasm between JFK's attitudes to, say, the current administration. Take, for example, the debate about invading Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's hard to imagine George W.'s administration articulating the same qualms. In fact, they didn't. Look at Iraq, all potential problems bypassed in the agenda far less urgent than during the 62 crisis. It's an excellent book, by the way. I suggest you all read it. Another perspective on the 60s, eh, Mark? Posted by Oliver. And Daniel, I fucking love your perspective. Nuclear weapons as the apocalypse expectation of the Middle Ages intensified and brought into realization by science its roots in the Enlightenment. One of the strands in the rejection of Enlightenment thought in post-war French philosophy, for example, wasn't this also to do with the destruction it had precipitated and the terrible consequences for humanity it had orchestrated? Potential extinction? Posted by Oliver. Still can't access that link. Oliver, can you hook me up? Posted by Peter M. Yeah, of course. Sorry, which link? Me? Posted by Oliver. Found it. Dole, great stuff. Thanks. Posted by Peter M. Just reading Freud's Vows for the Time on War and Death and their correspondence with Einstein. Certainly support your take, Mr. K. Posted by Peter M. November 18th, 2003. Tumbleweed. Wind whistling. Just in case there's anyone still out there, believe it or not, to compound the recent overwork situation, I've actually been ill with that floating virus which seems to be afflicting most of the British population at the moment. I haven't given up. November 18th, 2003, Radiophonic Vinyl. This just in from Marcus at Reflex. Reflex are releasing a 4x10-inch vinyl set of works by the BBC Radiophonic Workshop just in time for Christmas. The 4x10-inch vinyl version we are releasing features the members' work given roughly a side per member, except Delia Derbyshire, perhaps the most celebrated of all the members, who gets a whole record to herself for the first time ever. Brings together tracks from the recently released Radiophonic 1 and 2 CDs. Comments. Any Fagandini rarities? Any Fagandini for that matter? Posted by Michael. Marcus, can you help with this? Posted by Mark K-Punk. Here you are. 1A Record 1, Delia Derbyshire. 1. Matachin, Delia Derbyshire. 2. Happy Birthday, Delia Derbyshire. 3. Air, Delia Derbyshire. 4. Ziuzi, Ooh, Delia Derbyshire. 5. Door to Door, Delia Derbyshire. 6. Pot or Fair, Delia Derbyshire. 7. Time to Go, Delia Derbyshire. 1B, Delia Derbyshire. 1. Blue Veils and Golden Sands, Delia Derbyshire. 2. The Delian Mode, Delia Derbyshire. 3. Towards Tomorrow, Delia Derbyshire. 2A, Record 2, John Baker. Radio Nottingham, Milky Way, The Chase, Factors, Sea Sports, Time and Tune, Festival Time, The Missing Jewel, Boys and Girls, The Frogs Wooing, New Worlds, all from John Baker. 2B, John Baker. Fresh Start, Reading Your Letters, Quiz Time, PIGS, Brio, Structures, Chano, Accentric, Tomorrow's World, Christmas Commercial, all from John Baker. Free Side A, David Kane / Richard Yeoman Clark. Crossbeat, Autumn and Winter, Artbeat, War of the Worlds, Radio Sheffield, all from David Kane, Waltz Antipathy from Richard Yeoman Clark. Freebie, Dick Mills, Paddy Kingsland, Roger Lim. Crazy Daisy, Adagio, Major Blood Knock Stomach, all from Dick Mills. The World of Science, The Panel Beaters, both from Paddy Kingsland. Kitten's Lullaby, Geraldine, both from Roger Lim. 4A, Malcolm Clark. Bath Time, La Grande Piece de la Four, de la Rue Delaware. Romanescan Route. 4B, Glynis Jones. Nenafar, that's Glynis Jones with Malcolm Clark. Schlum Rule, Veils and Mirrors, both from Glynis Jones. Posted by Marcus. Thanks, Marcus. The vinyl release BBC Radiophonic Workshop 21 included the original version of Time Beat as distinct from George Martin's elaboration. Why this and her other workshop compositions couldn't have been included on the first CD is a mystery. VLS's documentary also featured Madeleine's frankly terrifying realization of an Eric Coates march, posted by Michael. Well, as you can imagine, ownership / rights / estates, etc., and just having a decent archive is a bit of a nightmare when releasing this kind of thing, posted by Marcus. Mark Ayres is definitely working on more radiophonic reissues. From what I can gather, the 21 type material will be much in evidence. 2 CDs from last year were never intended to stray far from the original track listings. In fact, the extra tracks on there were originally intended for the 1968 and 1975 releases, but were left off the final masters for one reason or another. Isle won't be satisfied until John Baker's 1970s BBC Wales continuity theme, Tros Y Garrig, is released, though. Talking of Time Beat, the record version, it was played on BBC Two over the CFAX pages a few nights ago, just before the Learning Zone started. The slightly extended stereo mix as well. Didn't see that one coming. Posted by SH. Yo Freelance, posted by Michael. Coughs. Who? Coughs again, posted by SH. As the brother of John Baker, I have many of his tapes. In time, I mean to issue a limited edition CD of his work. Posted by Richard Anthony Baker. Richard, that would be wonderful. John's work has never received the acclaim it deserves, and I'll be first in the queue for a copy. Do keep us informed, please. Posted by SH. November 18th, 2003. Brains, Vats, and Matrices. How can anyone ever disprove the brain in the vat theory / the matrix theory? It seems impossible to counter it. We only experience what our body tells us is happening. Electronic pulses. This is all this reality that is all this reality we experience is. The ever-excellent Bile on the Matrix. Well, as I once remarked, what is interesting about the brain in the vat theory is the vat, not the brain. Contrary to certain Cartesian readings, which would suggest that subjectivity is what is most real, the brain in the vat theory implies that subjectivity is a machine function. The great disappointment of the Matrix is that, in any case, and as I've said before, it wouldn't make that much difference whether you were in it or out of it. I, for one, would vote to be in the Matrix. What's the gain from fighting your way to the truth except some proxy enlightenment, pointless paranoia, hokey melodrama, and tedious, interminable fight scenes? The fact is, you have personal relationships with people who look exactly as they do in reality. Compare this to Vanilla Sky, a completely enclosed, solipsistic world in which the lead character only seems to be having relationships with others. That seems to me a relevant difference, unlike the differences between the Matrix sim world and the world outside it. Okay, this is said without seeing the third one. I fell asleep in the second one, which reinforced my impression that it was like a dream of looking over someone else's shoulder while they were playing a video game, interrupted by some of the most inept comic geek's idea of intellectual dialogue. The scene at the end of The Architect was toe-curlingly embarrassing, as, for a matter of fact, was that club scene at the start. Like the Duran Duran Wilder Boys video 20 years too late, and worse. Wow, I'm angry today. Suffice it to say that I was as surprised at Bal's admiration of the Matrix trilogy as I was at Angus' claim that Pulp Fiction was the best film of the 90s. Don't even start me on Tarantino, although I don't need to bother, since even his admirers couldn't get it up for Kill Bill. It's pretty obvious that his iconic days are numbered. I think I am alone in the entire world in thinking the club scene was okay, actually quite beautiful. I had a strong emotional response to the entire trilogy, for some reason, which I put down to either immaturing with age or a lack of aesthetic sophistication on my part. I suspect the Architect scene was meant to be embarrassing, actually. However, I agree, better in the Matrix than out. Well, I suppose we are in the Matrix, aren't we? Or we wouldn't be able to do this. Glad you are back. B. Posted by Bal. Completely agree, the real world in the Matrix is BORING. I'd much rather live in the Matrix, a world where the very worst thing that can happen is that you have to go to a boring job every day. I mean, hello? Won't attempt to defend Tarantino in any rational way. What can I say? I walked out of Pulp Fiction feeling like I just had something rather good injected into my veins. My admiration for it really is more visceral than anything else. What a cop-out. Sorry, I'm tired. Posted by Angus. I'm down with Bird on this one. Hubert Dreyfus is a philosopher known both for his pioneering discussion of the philosophical problems of artificial intelligence in his work in bridging the gap between recent European and English language philosophy. In The Brave New World of the Matrix, he and his son Stephen Dreyfus draw on the phenomenological tradition that began with Edmund Husserl and culminates in Maurice Merleau-Ponty to discuss the skeptical and moral problems raised by the film. They argue that the real worry facing folks trapped in the Matrix involves not deception or the possession of possibly false beliefs, but the limits on creativity imposed by the Matrix, following Martin Heidegger in suggesting that our human nature lies our capacity to redefine our nature and thereby open up new worlds. They conclude that this capacity for radical creation seems unavailable to those locked within the pre-programmed confines of the Matrix. Posted by Peter M. I liked the first Matrix. I thought it was about taking acid. I might be wrong, but I doubt it. Posted by Luke. I once watched The Matrix on acid and came to the conclusion that the only significant stuff was contained in the shots of numbers scrolling down the screen. Unhappily, I couldn't seem to decode them. As for Peter M's comment, Neo has no limits imposed upon him by the Matrix at the end of the first film, at least less than he does in the real world. Dreyfus is committing the usual egocentric phenomenological error. As Marx says, it's the vat which is interesting, and the potential for creativity, etc., is a lot higher in the Matrix than Zion and its surroundings.
December 4th, 2003. In my absence. Even Sir Lord Penman is back posting. Well, if that isn't enough motivation enough to take up the cudgels once again. Just about every group ever seems to have been progged. Not to sound like a killjoy or nothing, or like I'm missing the point of this joke, but is prog really equivalent to any producer of a concept album? Madness, The Rise and Fall, You What? Surely this kind of concept album, a bit like the Kinks one, or even the Small Faces Ogden Nut Gone Flake, have more of a lineage in Cockney music hall, which provokes the thought, how does rock opera fit into this? Tommy, Quadrophenia, all that. Also, I get that The Fall could have been prog at certain points in their career, but Live at the Witch Trials? Live at the Witch Trials is their least prog, most snotty, amphetamine garage LP. Hex Induction Hour with the 18-minute or whatever Winter and the ridiculously elongated And This Day, that'd be closer. Wouldn't that be the influence of Canon VDG partly? Can hardly avoid commenting on the John Fox inclusion for The Garden in synth-pop prog, now can I? Not sure about this one. I've always thought it to be a noble but flawed attempt to return to a bucolic pastoral after the urbanoia of Metamatic. Actually, it's not even very synth-pop. Synthesizers feature, but as part of an ensemble of real instruments. But no songs above 4 minutes, no absurd time changes, no overarching narrative concept. But, as for art punk prog, Ultravox's Ha 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 is a must. Just what is the relationship between art pop / rock and prog anyhow? As for prog cinema, Lindsay Anderson, Oh Lucky Man, Britannia Hospital, must be added to the list. Now for that absence. Can only echo IP's comments on laziness. I think Roland Barthes wrote some paean to laziness, didn't he? Which I can't celebrate in quite the same terms, since for me it is a direct consequence of work, its flip side. They're making me do something, therefore in my own time I'll do absolutely nothing. Energy is eternal delight. Lethargy is eternal misery. Comments. Prog Cinema. That's a canister of worms you're opening there. Art House, Auteurs, Antonioni. That's just A. Posted by Nick K. I seem to remember that Bath's passage on laziness too. I'd dig it up, but, well, I'll just let that joke finish itself. Welcome back, Mark. Posted by Angus. December 6, 2003. Clash to Cash. Documentary from '99 on The Clash repeated tonight on BBC Two to commemorate the first anniversary of Strummer's death. Well, the music is unredeemable. A frustrating, blocked, blunt, ugly sludginess. None of the Pistols' cascading glam power, none of Leyden's sorcerous incandescence, just honest-to-goodness lo-fi brick garage rock and Strummer's social worker rabble-rousing. Spit on me, and I know I'll lose brownie points hereabouts for this, but I always thought that the Jam were much better at this sort of thing. The ramrod inflexibility and devoid of funk whiteness of the early Jam, almost the anti-type of the Style Council's flailing attempts at soulfulness and jazz-funky sophistication, was just much more effective than the Clash's inchoate blaster. Both bands essentially boiled down the Kinks' Brit Invasion sound into a council estate rock for the 70s, the Clash throwing in some earnest but awful reggae into the mix, of course, yet the Jam made better use of their resources, going underground and Eton rifles bristle with class nuances and ambivalences in a way that the Clash's faded placards never did. What chance have you got against a tie and a crest? Remains a great line too. It's obvious now that the Clash paved the way for U2, as the Clash, by then top 5 in America, imploded with impeccably anti-careerist timing in 1982, U2 were waiting in the wings, and 5 years later they would complete the job that the Clash had started, selling American myth music back to the Americans. All that said, who could not feel more than a pang of nostalgia for the 70s in watching the documentary? Music as an anti-social force, as cultural electricity. Music as more than music. All gone now. What the early Clash in particular must be celebrated for is the abstract sense of potential that they embodied. Anything could happen. All gone now. And now, isn't everything jaded before it has even been released? Everything's cornered. There's always an angle, a marketing strategy, a master plan. It's all sewn up. Yeah, that was always the case to some degree, no doubt. But has mainstream pop, at any time since the 50s, been so bereft of cultural energy, a blind, implacable marketing mechanism, autistically indifferent to new input, permanently set to recycle? It seems almost gauchily obvious to complain, but isn't that Pop Idol Lennon travesty just typical of this? Even I can't watch Pop Idol now, by the way. Watching ITV at the best of times is a soiling and debasing experience. Pop Idol takes this to a new level. You can't watch without your reality flattening out into an endlessly unscrolling tabloid page in which everything is reduced to the lowest common denominator. You feel contaminated, greasy, impossible and irrelevant to moan about Cowell's aesthetics. But what you have to admire about him actually is his undisguised instrumentalism, his total indifference to content. In that respect, he is a metonym for remorseless capital. The News of the World actually gave away a free Best of Simon Cowell CD a few weeks ago. You'd have thought that this was a bit of a double-edged sword for Cowell, whose CV is hardly packed with lasting pop milestones. Could have looked less like a hagiographic roundup of his achievements than a shaming revelation of what his legacy amounts to. Records that you'll find going begging every week in car boot sales up and down the country. But that's missing the point somewhat. Of course, Cowell's reputation, such as it is not based on any musical judgment, needless to say, but on a commercial eye for short-termist exploitation. And what's worse about this is that those he's exploiting are wide-eyed aware of it. What he is hawking in every sense is success. Success as end in itself, the reality teleology. Old news, and it wouldn't matter if there were any alternative. Yet here it comes, unavoidable, ineluctable, a force of nature. Christmas war is over. Everyone in the video smiling and simpering, singing in that 15th hand, let's get it on orgasmic R&B moan. American Vowels and Craig, David Bow Selector yowls. Incidentally, when did that become the only way to sing? The Pop Idol contestants have long made an art out of total insensate inability to connect with what they are singing about. Anyone remember the ABBA travesties of a couple of years back? But this is genuinely stupefying. Needless to say, any trace of Lennon's irony or cynicism have been scoured, cowled, clean. The song's gleaming, picked clean skeleton, a monument to Cowellite capitalism's indifferent capacity to use up and process anything. And has anyone seen the all-new Top of the Pops? It's like the Seventh Circle of Hell. Tim Cash,
Those SF teeth, digitally enhanced smarm, a man, though I wonder if he really can be human, devoid of even the hint of personality, a kind of professional poise incarnate, and the all-new top of the pops. As it seeks to detach itself from the charts, it frees itself up to be a marketing vehicle for the industry. It's airless, impenetrable, the sound of inevitability of what has already been decided. Met Kub. It is written. Comments. And has anyone seen the all-new top of the pops? A marketing vehicle for the industry. It's airless, impenetrable, the sound of inevitability of what has already been decided. Same as it ever was. TOTP was always awful. Simply nostalgia for your faded youth that makes you remember it as being better, whenever back then was, than it is now. Even the good bands, whoever you might think they were shit when they played TOTP. Posted by Val. Fuck me, I thought I was in a bad mood with my Macker attack. But Mark returns with some savagery. True, it's a bit of an obvious target, but still good to see someone echoing my own thoughts on the matter so accurately. Could the blogosphere be the nearest equivalent to the empathy machines in Philip K. Dick's Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Posted by Nick. Just to respond to Val's comment, I actually loved watching TOTP when I was younger, so cannot agree that it's always been awful. The thing that I might find most disturbing nowadays is the unrelenting professionalism, the pursuit of fame for fame's sake, the high-gloss, high-glamour presentation that is just so tediously conservative. This stuff could never touch me in the way that, say, a gloriously ramshackle early Bananarama performance could. Where are the fashion renegades to rival Adamant, Boy George, or even Toya? Is this just nostalgia talking? Probably, but I still maintain that the rot started to set in roughly around the same time that Paul Hardcastle's TOTP theme was introduced. The Thin Lizzy / Midge-Earth theme era was ace, and all the 70s stuff was ace too. One more thing, TOTP performances should always be mimed. These live shows sound shite. Posted by Nick. Entirely with you on that bloke, Cash. It's like he was born in a TV studio. Also find your reading of the BBC as a distinct cultural entity, why not, as charming as ever, disables it in a fashion. Posted by Matt. Nick, my twin as ever, perfectly echoes my own thoughts. I just can't accept that TOTP wasn't better in the old days. No doubt that's partly because pop was better in those days, I'll grant. Part of the point of the Clash post was that there was a time when pop was driven by energies other than those of the marketers. TOTP reflected that, and couldn't avoid reflecting it because it was chart-based. There was such a thing as a pop culture then. The different role of fashion that Nick talks of is definitely a part of that. Fashion now equals a grim subordination to capital conservatism. Fashion then was as much about new possibilities, enchantments of the real, as was the music. More than the music in many ways, what people were wearing was capable of opening up whole worlds. The whole "did you see that" phenomenon? You only have to remember what it was like to see Boy George, Human League, Japan on TV for the first time. What was that? I wonder how the construction of youth has played a role in the all-malevolent top of the pops. Maybe the decline started with the new Radio 1, with the inhibiting cool of a certain model of what it is to be young. There's something charming and appealing about the gauche absurdity of the Radio 1 old school, Bates, Reed, Powell, who in their own way had a ridiculous flamboyance entirely lacking in the conservative young professionals of today. Matt, can you explain this for me? Also find your reading of the BBC as a distinct cultural entity, why not, as charming as ever, disables it in a fashion. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Also must echo Nick's remarks on playing live. Please no. There's nothing more delibidinizing and destructive to pop than performing live. The revenge of rockism? Of course, TOTP is forced down this route by the increasing popularity of 24-hour music channels in the search for a unique selling point. Funnily enough, I remember Pete Waterman saying he would never let one of his acts play live on TV. Because of mixing, he spends days getting it right on the record. TV sound engineers throw a mix together in half an hour that, anyway, will sound shit when broadcast. Part of the problem with TOTP now is the inherent lack of charisma of today's pop stars. There's just nothing arresting, nothing to fixate upon or be fascinated by in their performance. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Just working on something tonight which should clear it up, big man. Thanks for bearing with me. Posted by Matt. Good to have you back, Mark. The Clash? Not much different from Pop Idol, really. All image, no substance, and so American. Posted by Sean. Watching Top of the Pop Saturday this morning, I thought how tidy the girls' haircuts were and how they looked like typical fashionable PR types. The girls did the soul things, and the boys did the cheeky public school boy inspired by Dad's CD collection tidy rock things. It was all very tidy, very organized, lacking in youthful energy, provocational, and libido. Each 5-star made their own clothes, And Take That did a Cream-style remix of Relight My Fire. Even the Venga Boys had some kind of pop concept. Now it's just too clean. This kind of sexless posing just misses the point. You can't plan this stuff. Posted by MCus. Funnily enough, 5-star crossed my mind earlier on. I think they occupy a grey area between style and individualism. Remember those American football cloths? And the ultra-professional control of the modern pop idol. Their finely crafted, super slick dance routines certainly seem to be prototypes for today's groups. I have mixed feelings about them in many ways. The actual songs are very good, I thought. Proper pop music, strong hooks, tight electro-based grooves, female vox, always a plus in my pop checklist. In some ways, 5-star embodied my love/hate relationship with the mid to late 80s pop scene. It seemed rotten at the time, but now it seems to resonate more powerfully with each passing year. I'm sure it's all subjective, but what if it isn't? Posted by Nick. Nick, your thoughts exactly chime in with mine once again. Are you sure we weren't separated at birth? I actually loved 5-star at the time, although I'm ashamed to say that I can't remember any of the titles just at the moment, apart from System Addict. I wonder how super slick the dance routines would look by today's standards, though. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Their dance routines are pretty complicated and fast, like Happy Shopper Michael Jackson, which is why I guess they used those call center style headpiece mouth mics. My sister loved 5-star, so in the tradition of Big Brothers, I thought they were rubbish. She also bought Smash Hits, which had a cartoon called The 5-Star Story in it, probably one of the most boring cartoons ever. December 7th, 2003. Why I hate Kylie. It's not personal. Really, it's not. After all, we know so little about her. She's perfected that smiling art of PR deflection, of projecting a sweetly vacuous wholesomeness. Fair enough, that's not the issue. It's not even about the records. I'm highly partial to many of them, not only slow and can't get, but most of the old SAW tunes too. I think what I hold Kylie responsible for is trailblazing the rise of the performing arts pop star, the Paps. There's something ironic about the triumph of the performing arts aesthetic, because Paps are actually very unconvincing performers, precisely because they have professionalized performance turned into a series of learnable moves and techniques. In the case of Kylie, I suspect this distanciation has something to do with being a bad actress. She has to always let you see that is her doing the performing. She has to own it. She is incapable of going with it. Letting yourself go, getting carried away, are of course very unprofessional. Whereas great performance is always about being possessed, taken over, or at least being capable of projecting that illusion. A comparison that will no doubt invite derision. Alex Parks. Alex is almost the diametric opposite of Kylie. What she's incapable of doing is looking detached, of being arch or meta. Believe it or not, she's actually much more comfortable on television than Kylie. Kylie can't ever forget, or let us forget, that she's on TV. There's always that aura of self-consciousness, which finds its alibi in camp. Alex entirely lacks this. Her every micro-gesture screams affect. In fact, is there anyone less camp than Alex? Interesting how this cuts across issues of sexuality, by the way. While Kylie, for all her vaunted gay following, is almost parodically, pornographically heterosexual, but thoroughly camp, a bit like the allegedly hetero Robbie. Alex, 0 degree camp, is sexually ambivalent, achingly androgynous. Who could now harbour the delusion that there is anything remotely subversive or unsettling about camp? Camp is the ruthlessly enforced meta-aesthetic of the time, a justification and underpinning for conservatism of all stripes, including sexual conservatism, and Kylie is its pop queen. Comments. Mark, this is getting really good. Posted by Sean. Doesn't that kind of depend on what you understand camp to actually mean? I do like the phrase performing arts pop star, by the way. Posted by Angus. Doesn't that kind of depend on what you understand camp to actually mean? Kind of. It's a bit like the irony thing, isn't it? There's unintentional camp, the campness of sincerity, of taking things too seriously, which is almost the polar opposite of Kylie/Robbie, whose whole being is devoted to ensuring that they never, ever fall into that trap. As for the performing arts pop star, Victoria Beckham is another one. So is Jerry, actually. The much less accomplished at it than Kylie. Watching Victoria's new video, it's obvious that the poor girl, and one can't watch without feeling pity, is locked in the attic space of her own meta-myth, never to return. Victoria, of course, is an example of that other type of camp, as vulgar and tastelessly OTT as Liberace. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Yes, well, I must collect my thoughts and do a post sometime soon on what I think camp means, because I do feel rather protective of it. In fact, I strongly identify with it, and so my feathers get ruffled when it's used as a byword for pomo irony/cynicism. Can be used not to be cynical at any rate, and I think dividing it into intentional versus unintentional is a bit of a false dichotomy too, but more on that anon. Posted by Angus. Isn't Alex camp simply because she's unaware of her situation? She's a wannabe singer-songwriter in the thinnest sense, in the vein of Tracy Chapman, etc., who wins a competition for throwaway pop stars. She's extremely serious and just doesn't seem to fit the leagues of pretty neat orange teenage girls that dominate pop. She's camp because she's utterly unaware of her deluded pomp, in the same way Oasis are camp. Kylie's not camp because she's utterly studied. She can reflect electroclash and have loads of stereotypical muscle Marys dancing in her videos because she looks pretty dirty, rolling around half naked. Kylie's creates a kind of gay parade, but at the heart of it, close-ups of her body will still be in the sun or the mirror, so next time a bloke who's seen those pics watches the video, he won't even see the gay elements, he'll just be looking for a rerun of those moments of tight flesh close-ups he saw in one of the tabloids. Posted by M.Cus. Angus, I await your defense of camp with bated breath. Whenever it has been defended to me, it has been on the grounds that camp articulates the gap between yearning and its realization, a longing to become/identity with something, together with a recognition that both you, and more importantly it, fall short. Camp reflects an inability to give up the yearning in and for pop culture's dreams. This kind of camp I can live with, but surely we can agree there's a version of camp dominant in pop, particularly here in the UK, that is wearily cynical. I'm sure you're not going to agree that Kylie fits this model, but there's no denying that Robbie is its exemplar, and no one wants to defend him, do they? M.Cus. I think you're illustrating one of the problems of using the term camp, that it can apply to phenomena that are diametrically opposed to one another. Aren't you using camp in the sense of what I was calling unintentional camp? Kylie can't be camp because she's too studied, yet for intentional camp, being studied is a prerequisite. Posted by Mark K. Punk. Mark, yeah, my defense would go something like that, certainly. I also agree that camp is routinely used to refer to a kind of cynicism that, as you say, is almost opposite to the good kind. I get grumpy about that, but I suppose I can't really complain about shifts in usage. It's language, after all. Interesting question whether the ubiquity of bad camp has now made good camp impossible. But I have to rush back to work, so yeah, I'll think more about it. Posted by Angus. Kylie is really pretty. She has a really pretty face and cool body. She doesn't look ugly. Kylie has not had any plastic surgery. Hello. She's just natural. She is probably the prettiest girl that has ever been alive in this earth ever. Pa ha 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 ha. Not she is so not. She's a fake plastic and she looks weird. Posted by Kylie Wannabe. Well, the old debate, huh? I, for one, must confess that I find old Kyle's offensive. Not her as an individual, but the assumption that marketing can neutralize the free-thinking parts of our cortex or whatever, to the point that we actually believe that her and her ilk are artists angers me. Yet we all trot off on a daily basis buying Coca-Cola and other brands that are inferior yet hideously popular. Same to be said of good old Kyle's. Clever those Svengalis were, you know. All those bored soap opera addicted Brits are as a ready-to-go fan base. Who gives a rat's whether she can sing? She doesn't need to. She just needs to turn up at cocktail parties and MTV awards, mouth the words at her recording sessions, and keep the masses convinced that her fantasies are true. Just why people want to have fantasies like that is yet another diatribe. Do you remember the Charlie Brown's Xmas tree? There's an old political maxim that says, a country gets the leader it deserves. Maybe we as a free world audiosonic consuming megalith, we need to get in touch with the reasons as to why some no talent like Kyle's is paraded as high popular art. God help us. Gary. P.S. All the more alarming as it was the 40th anniversary of the Beatles landing in NYC last week. Yikes, 40 years, is that all it takes? Posted by Gary. A very talentless, fake plastic woman who has done well with media, both fooled us all getting our money. Society is nuts. But she is falling. She called someone a nerd because he asked whether she had plastic surgery. Just admit it, you fake bar voice, boring no character hoe has been lucky and has airbrushed all her images. Your lingerie so crap, your ass so standard. Yeah, so many fit girls around with real tight ass. Yours is liposucked. How can the media report that her ass is ideal for a woman? Rubbish. She is small, not ideal. She would need a cesarean section to have a baby if she does ever. Hosted by no fan of her. It saddens me how this very simple blank person with a standard voice and no talent has done okay. How she has enhanced her image profile through good plastic surgeries. She denied it. Watch Neighbours again. and thinks she is high up her ass. She cannot sing, and if you see her on the street, she is a rather thin, short old woman with wrinkles despite Botox all over and a standard hiney. Her music sucks. She is terribly fake. Her personality mediocre but okay compared to other blank posh spice / girls aloud / Emma Bunton / Jerry Halliwell. It's about time she steps down. Let us all realize that media has created an illusion of this ordinary lass, and they have both shared a good amount of money. Her song Red-Blooded Woman is rubbish. Bad voice unlike gorgeous Beyonce or Britney or Pink or Miss Aguilera. The video is so boring, just boring images of her fake Botoxed post-facelift and liposucked standard ass and abnormally arched body to enhance a fake pair of tits and ass enough to have spinal damage. Please just accept you are rather characterless, boring, ordinary Kylie. You are not amazing, love. Posted by James. Go to http://www.amiannoying.com. Vote against Kylie. She's an evil little troll, a nasty piece of work. Posted by Craig. Shite, it has all been said by James. Vacuous, stupid, dullard female. No owned her photocopy mails cannot be faithful for longer than a couple of months. I bet she is as cold as a nun in truth. All image. Her waxwork has more sexuality than the real thing. Big Q is what the hell does Oliver Martinez, a jazz fan for a start. And philosophical chap seeing this phony, stupid, consumptive canary voice. And oh God, it talk free of them to write the lyrics for I Believe in You, which is the usual utter crap. Who the hell is buying all these concert tickets? She is crap as an artist and a provincial brain-dead bimbo as a person. She makes my blood boil. How to get rich with no talent at all. Calendar girl does not cut it when 80% of that body is plastic anyway. She looks like gazed ham. Posted by Mallory. Kylie is just another in the long line of Madonna wannabes, borrowing left, right, and centre from her, and then watering all the elements down in her pathetic live performances. The British public, for some reason, is fascinated with her because she represents nothing. Nothingness personified. Posted by Sandra. It is personal for me. She typifies all that is bad about modern fame. Take the past year or so. She withers on and on in every chat show going, radio station, magazine, about her Mr. Lovely blah blah. Acts, demands he marry her, it gets set for June and he pulls out. Huge rose follow when she tittles off to Oz of her oh-so-average range of lingerie, and he has a fantastic time staying home in France running the gauntlet of parties and sheiks. She rushes back. More flaming arguments, and then she returns to UK, where everyone loves her no matter what, and he pushes off to LA for the Snow Goose, which only started filming in October. But anyway, tabloids pick up he has not been around since Aug, nor has she been to him in LA, and then they scream that she ranted to Oz Radio in defense of her man, and all is fine. She wants privacy, please, because on top of this, she is comforting Danny, who dumped her French bloke. So tabloids eat humble pie and all is well, till a day later when some record site screams that Kylie says her phone bill is huge due to hours a day on phone to LA having phone sex. What was that about keeping private again? On other side of Pond News, is that he is out and about with different females, non-Kylie, and yesterday he apparently said Kylie wants to get married, I do not, end of. Oh, and same gossip, comforting Danny, who was filming in NY. Come again? It is all about PR, no damn talent at all, yet BBC side is littered with rubbish about the new single being the best song ever written and sung. Not NY Kylie, but ever. She makes me vomit as the epitome of mediocrity embodied. Then again, her parents promoted both of them age 7 and have lived in luxury through them ever since, so how dysfunctional is that? The Melbourne Minogue Mafia? Plastic vacuous, silly, stupid female drives me nuts, not even worthy of an intellectual debate about camp. She performed on and off stage, and has she ever once sung live in a concert while it's raking in millions? Haha, as if. Minnie Mouse on helium. Posted by Emma. What I really hate even more than the talentless dwarf herself are her militant Nazi-like fans. In defense of their opinionless industry puppet idol, all they say is that Kylie is about fun. Obviously you don't like fun pop if you don't like Kylie. Not really. Kylie is all about regurgitated, charmless pop pap. I really don't understand the fascination. I'm not the biggest Madonna fan, it has to be said, but I can definitely see her appeal. Kylie's just the poor, very poor man's Madonna. Posted by Jenny. Dear Sarah, your absurd comments belong on the official fan site, not here. I'll not even dignify your blinded comments. I take pity on you and your fellow worshippers of the utterly mediocre. So there as you put it. How old are you? 14? Posted by Emma. What I hate is utter lack of sincerity or emotion in that warbling, red-blooded woman. pernicious enema. She is like some toy that gets wound up and sings on auto cue. Each new photo shoot has paralyzed yet more facial expression and character. She's left with two expressions now, the collagen pout and collagen grin, all teeth too. She does not dance either, but floats around, waving arms like a flamingo lost in a fog. She is a travesty of the word talent. What gets me is that there is so much good music out there, battling to earn a quid, whilst this PR nightmare goes on, sounding the same now as she did in 1980s, and it was horrible then and horrible now.
December 7th, 2003. Use your loaf. Isn't this from the loaf just perfect? Extraordinary, this brain, the one I reluctantly inhabit. It just seems to want to reflect badly upon every event that it encounters. The body lies down and then the brain pours bitter vitriol on the day, and I can't seem to tame it no matter what training I apply to it. It just doesn't like living. As a loaf fan, I find myself torn when faced with the latest felicitous developments in Sean's life, pleased for Sean but worried about the future of the Loaf sitcom. Loaf leaving the ranks of the single male, whatever next. All this going out and getting a life, where will it end? Lest we forget, check these words of wisdom. So yes, at the moment I am single. How ashamed I am. Christ, I should hand myself into the nearest police station. And I don't own a property. I don't own any land. My greatest crime, should I confess it? Yes, I shall. I haven't bred. I have gone against nature. I have rebelled against the laws of nature. I should be strung up. Comments. Loaf and Erase are my favourite blogs anywhere at the Mo. They're both totally firin'. Posted by Scott. I wouldn't worry, Mark. It's bound to end in tears. Posted by Sean. December 7th, 2003. 3 great things about Erase the World. 1. The poetry of the writing. Check his evocation of Yorkshire, for instance. I was all but packing my bags. 2. The existential fixation on death. 3. The willingness to buck fashion and defend the indefensible. I wholeheartedly agree about Manilow's Mandy, and while I find charitable thoughts towards Westlife quite beyond me, if we have to put up with them picking young girls' pockets, it might as well be with a song that it isn't actually physically intolerable. Comments. Personally, I'm more than partial to Can't Smile Without You, posted by Philip. December 7th, 2003. No apologies. For one insane minute after I posted that rant on the Pop Idol Xmas record, I began to wonder if my vitriol might have been a little ill-informed, since it was based only on a cursory half-listen to the single. Then I caught the end of Pop Idol Tonight, in which the Pop Idol 12, appropriate name that sounds like a group of terrorist suspects up in court, crime, cultural murder, performed their long, slow slaughter of Lennon. And so, this is Christmas. They all sound the same. Close your eyes, it's impossible to tell any of them apart. They all pronounce the words in that stupid mid-Atlantic accent. They all layer on the vibrato. Question, before Pop Idol, did everyone sing like this? Did Pop Idol merely pick up on a trend in karaoke, R&B, boy bland emoting? Or did it invent it? War is over? It hasn't even started. Comments. What kind of music do you like, bitch ass? I am a gay homo anyways, and I like guys. Posted by Def. Only eye-holding page, but still, I will have less of taking the mick out of boy bland. I'm sick of it, okay? Posted by Bland. Pop crap is trying to imitate the USA for its sound at the minute, so until something more palatable comes along, you best get used to it, mate. Yes, and it is crap, isn't it? New ideas would be nice. You are right, mate. Posted by... doesn't say there. December 19th, 2003. O'Free's Madeleines, Part 1. Intermittent insomniac radio silence breaker. K-Punk would love to provide you with one of those end-of-the-year roundups that everyone else is doing, but I'm just not systematic enough about remembering what came out when, and not having yet managed to secure sufficient freebies, nor being a radio junkie like Luke, nor an obsessive collector like Matt. I haven't got close to hearing 50 albums this year, so choosing a top 50 would be a little difficult. Better than choosing the best in some ways would be to choose the O3 Madeleines, those moments that will later recall 2003, though it's almost impossible to say what they are now. What the future of pop sounded like in 2003, Junior Boys, Birthday/Last Exit EP, the record without which no self-respecting end of O3 Roundup is complete. So much has been said about the JBs, and their uniqueness lies in the fact that they can be placed next to the musics in the category below. The contemplative, uneasy listening of Sylvian and Fox/Bud, as much
as in the company of anything more conspicuously contemporary. Their triumph is a triumph of visionary diagonals over marketing angles, doing what is so right as opposed to what is required or what is inevitable. The junior boys are obvious in that retrospective way that everything groundbreaking always is. Of course, there's no reason why Daryl Hall shouldn't swoon with Sylvian and Timberland. And of course, that obviousness eluded all the labels who rejected them in the early days. See the Hyperdub interview if you doubt it. Note, read Timberland. Be honest, Jeremy is more interesting than Tim these days. As Simon says, who can muster much more of an indifference for Timbo now? Lost Futures / Alternative Presents. Sylvian, Blemish. John Fox and Harold Budd. Translucent / Drift Music. Blemish, so much rawer than anything else Sylvian's done. It's by far the most convincing act of divestment Sylvian has produced since Japan. Every moment in his career post-Japan has been an attempt at exorcism and unmasking, at scrubbing the makeup off. But the poses, however exquisitely they were realized, seemed just that, self-conscious postures, tasteful concoctions. The faces were still too well made up, concealing all blemishes perhaps. Blemish's rawness is due in no small part to its re-embracing of syntheticity, although in large part simply treated guitar and voice. We're never allowed to forget that this is a work of digital editing. You can hear the joins and couldn't think for even a moment that this is some acoustic as live, technologically innocent communion. I've not got round to saying anything about the Fox / Bud album on K-Punk, partly in fear of turning K-Punk into a Fox fan site, but it's another side of Fox, a side that has previously only come out in the Cathedral Oceans LPs, contributions to oceanic music. I hesitate to say oceanic rock, as lovely as anything in the genre, by the way. Fox's reputation as a synth-pop pioneer has included his more contemplative side, but even on Metamatic, his most ostensibly bleakly technical effort, Fox explored a kind of urban pastoral, a fascination with the fragile beauty and lost moments of the city, with its colonnades and arcades, with its unexpected possibilities for intimacy, with its delicately perfumed ghosts and elegantly poised statues. On Translucence and Drift Music, these themes are explored wordlessly, in a series of slivers of pure mood. The titles give you clues: spoken roses, long light, a change in the weather, sunlit silhouette, someone almost there. Like many of the main players in art pop, Fox, an accomplished digital artist, has a sensibility shaped by the visual, and his collaboration with Bud allows him to create what are in effect photographs in sound. Delicate, dilated presence, as insubstantial and ephemeral as autumn mist on the edge of absence and presence. The past is now, the rapture, echoes. Richard X presents his X Factor, the same malady given different expression on either side of the Atlantic, then dressed up as now. As you'd expect, being British, Richard X is more upfront, sarky, irreverent in his disinterrals of the late 70s / early 80s than are the po-faced Rapture, who are more serious artists in denial. As I said in one of the many pieces I wrote for NY Press, but which never appeared in the paper, grinds teeth, the X album has a lineage going back at least as far as The Who Sell Out, with its allusions to adverts and its knowing nods towards its own commodification. Like the Who album, the Richard X LP is art pop, pop's answer to pop art, a collage of trans-valued junk and junked-up haute couture. I found it irresistible. Is there anyone out there who didn't dig the Human League vs. Chaka Khan thing? And I needn't mention the still seductive sleaze of the Sugar Babe / Newman vampiric union. Check also X's reinvention of one of Spandau Ballet's greatest moments, chant number 1, the use of pop idol mannequins. Liberty X Javine is both an immersion in what passes for pop now and a meta commentary on it. After all, what are the pop idol judges always looking for? That X factor. The Rapture's TARDIS zeroes in on roughly the same time coordinates, although they don't pull X's trademark trick, splicing ultra-Caucasian cold synthetics with R and black soul. The funk in Echoes comes not direct from source, but from post-punk wide appropriation of funk. Yes, there's something absurd about revisiting the hysterical male odd mass of the late 70s and early 80s. Melodramas, I think that's meant to be, of the late 70s and early 80s. Yes, it should be as verboten and pitiful as Oasis or the White Stripes, and yet I couldn't help succumbing. A guilty pleasure, but a pleasure nonetheless. Pornography was always my favourite Cure LP, you'd be surprised to know, and hearing it spliced with the pop group in Gang of Four, hearing the Rapture find that yelping abstract machine that connects Robert Smith to Mark Stewart, well, how could I not enjoy it? An attraction also. see Dizzy below, is that it severs angst from its current associations with sub-metal bombast. So now it's already old. Dizzy rascal, boy in the corner. So much was said so soon that there's a kind of discourse drought and unwarranted weariness surrounding this now. Yet Sitting Here and Brand New Day are some of the best songs about depression since Joy Division. With so many teenagers suffering from depression or depression-related illnesses now, DR is the voice of a generation whose spokesmen have been all too tired, predictable and loud lately. Geez, I realise I've got a lot more to say about this year than I thought. See you next time for entries on Now Pop, Timberlake et al., Girls Aloud, Dear Ido, Christina/Beyonce. Comments. Where's part 2 then? You can't fool us, Marky. We know you're on holiday. Entertain us.